Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of India Chipchase. India Chipchase was born in 1996 in Northampton, England, into a loving family with two younger sisters and a younger brother. As the eldest daughter, she often helped her mother care for her siblings. Sometime later, her parents divorced and her father moved to Australia. Following high school, India enrolled in college to study medicine, inspired by her father's career as a doctor. However, during her studies, she began to question her decision and took some time to explore her true interests. She worked temporary jobs in bars and moved out of her mother's house. Her parents were supportive and did not pressure her, wanting only for her to be happy and pursue her passions. Ultimately, India realized that she did want to become a doctor, and her parents wholeheartedly supported her, believing she would thrive in the field. India was known for her intelligence, hard work, and compassion. India's personal life was going well. She had been in a relationship for several years with her high school sweetheart, Raikana, who was a well-known figure in the North. However, they broke up a couple of months before the tragedy. Despite the breakup, India and Raikana remained friends. Being a beautiful and attractive girl, India often drew the attention of many boys, which eventually caused her some issues. 3 weeks prior to the incident, she started dating a guy named Ivan Raihana, and her family approved of him. On the night of January 29, 2016, at around 11:30 p.m., 20-year-old India went out to a bar with her friends, where they enjoyed drinks together. During the peak of the fun, around 1 a.m., her friends lost sight of her. They assumed she went to the restroom, but even there they couldn't find her. The search in the bar was also unsuccessful. Then her friends thought India might have gone home. Unfortunately, none of the friends tried to contact her. In the morning, India's mother, Sue Chipchase, was unable to reach her daughter, which was unusual since India usually kept in touch with her parents. Concerned, Sue went to India's apartment but found it empty. Sue then called India's friends who had been with her at the bar, but they said they lost track of her around 1 a.m. and hadn't seen her since. Next, Sue contacts her boyfriend in India, who says he was at another bar with some friends last night. Even mentioned that he hadn't heard India's calls or messages due to the loud music. When he finally noticed 9 missed calls and 2 messages from India that morning and tried to call her back, she didn't answer. Ivan was unaware of India's whereabouts, which raised alarms for her parents. They feared something had happened to their daughter. Right away, Sue reported India missing to the police, and the police immediately began searching. India was declared missing. Over time, India's mother and sisters began posting information about her disappearance on social media in hopes that someone would respond. Detectives began their investigation at the bar, interviewing the staff and requesting surveillance footage. The staff members confirmed that they remembered India being there that night and noted that she was very intoxicated. Around 1 a.m., India went outside for fresh air, but the security guard refused to let her back in because of her intoxication, even as she insisted she wanted to re-enter. She mentioned that she wanted to go home, and the bartender assisted her by accompanying her to a taxi. However, when the taxi driver asked for payment up front after noticing her condition, India got upset and jumped out of the car. With no further options, the bartender returned to work. India then sat outside the bar, feeling very distressed and unsure of what to do. She tried texting and calling her boyfriend, but he didn't answer. The staff noted that they frequently dealt with similar situations and couldn't help every patron get home, which led them to refrain from intervening in India's situation. After a while, the security guard noticed a man approaching India. They seemed to be communicating well, and it appeared they were friends who had known each other for a long time. The man assured the security guard that he would take India home safely. India then accompanied him to a taxi, and they got into the car around 1:15 a.m. and drove away. After that, no one from the bar staff saw her again. Police reviewed the surveillance footage and confirmed that the staff accurately described the events. Detectives showed a photo of the man to India's family and friends, but they did not recognize him and were certain that India did not know him, which raised concerns. Investigators identified the license plate number of the taxi that India had taken with the stranger and contacted the driver. The taxi driver reported that when India and the man entered the car, the man asked to go to McDonald's, but later requested to change the destination to a different address near a gas station. When they arrived at that location, the man got out and asked the driver to wait for him for 5 minutes, to which the driver agreed. While the man went somewhere, India attempted to call her boyfriend, but he did not answer because his phone had died. India sent several messages to her friends, but they did not respond either. The man returned after approximately 5 minutes. He got back into the car and instructed the driver to take them to Stanley Road. During the ride, India occasionally fell asleep. The driver arrived at the destination around 1:40 a.m. India and the man exited the car and went in another direction while the driver drove away. The driver could not provide any additional information about her. On January 30, India did not come to work, even though she was scheduled to start her shift at 4 p.m. and had never been late or missed work before. Police reviewed the surveillance footage again for clues. One detective recognized the man who left with India, 52-year-old Edward Tenniswood. Investigators began to look into his background. They know that he had a criminal history of assault and abuse, and had recently been released from prison. In his youth, Edward stole a large amount of money from his father, which led to his father disowning him. After moving from London to Northampton, Edward faced challenges on his own and had no family support, which contributed to his reclusive behavior. Described as odd and quirky, he worked as an accountant, had never been married, and had no children. Acquaintances noted that he had no friends or girlfriends. For the past 5 years, Edward had been living in a rented apartment on Stanley Road. The neighbors described him as modest and quiet. Together with information from the conversation with the taxi driver, detectives were able to trace India's whereabouts and concluded that she had been staying at Edward's house on Stanley Road. They gathered enough evidence to obtain a warrant for his arrest. Less than a day after India disappeared, at 3:45 p.m. on January 31, the police went to his apartment. When no one answered the door, they forced it open. Upon entering, the police were horrified to find a girl's body on a mattress on the floor, covered with a sheet. She was already dead, the bedding was soaked in blood, and she had a head injury. The victim was identified as India. In the living room they found a bottle of wine and more blood nearby. Edward was not at home, and his apartment appeared unusual. The furniture was covered in plastic, and newspapers were organized neatly on the floor. Additionally, there were many clippings of beautiful women stored in boxes. India's phone was discovered under the stairs, while her shoes and handbag were carefully placed in the next room. Edward's neighbor reported seeing Edward at night with a girl as they approached the house. The girl was very drunk and could hardly walk, and Edward was assisting her. The neighbor was surprised, as he had never seen Edward bring girls to his home before. Investigators began to locate Edward by examining his banking records. They discovered that he had checked into a hotel and had paid for his stay with a card, remaining there for the night. Around 7 p.m., the police arrived at the hotel and found Edward sitting in the lobby watching television and drinking. He was arrested, and Edward was shocked by how quickly the police acted. He was charged with the murder of India Chipchase. Edward had scratches on his hands and neck, which seemed to be defensive wounds from the victim. When he was questioned at the police station, Edward shared a surprising story about the events that took place. He said that one night, while walking down the street, he noticed a girl crying near a bar. Concerned, he approached her, stating that he couldn't ignore a distressed girl. According to Edward, they had a brief interaction during which a connection formed. She smiled at him and opened up. He offered to take her home, and they got into a taxi to head to her place. On the way, their feelings for each other grew stronger. So Edward invited her to his home, and India accepted. The taxi dropped them off, and the driver left. Once inside, India went straight to the bathroom while Edward poured 2 glasses of wine. When India returned, she was in high spirits, and they sang, enjoyed their wine, and laughed together. At one point, she stumbled and fell, hitting her head and sustaining a minor injury that bled but wasn't serious. They laughed it off, and their conversation was enjoyable. Later, they consensually engaged in intimate activity. India asked him to choke her, and he agreed. Wanting to satisfy her, he choked her more forcefully, which she liked. However, he lost track of time and kept his hands around her neck for too long, about 10 seconds, by his reckoning. As a result, India's body began to convulse, and she lost consciousness. Edward was drunk and didn't realize that she had died. He fell asleep next to her body and remained unaware of her death throughout the night. In the morning, when he woke up, he noticed that she wasn't breathing. He thought she might have had a stroke or a diabetic seizure. Edward attempted to wake her, but nothing worked. Instead of checking her pulse, he poured himself a glass of wine. He acknowledged that something was wrong but didn't want to face it. After finishing his wine, he decided to change her clothes to make India look presentable. Then, he went for a walk to clear his mind and get something to eat. Edward believed that by the time he returned, she would wake up and everything would be fine. He had barbecue and continued drinking, but his anxiety only increased. Eventually, he checked into a hotel to find some peace. At the hotel, he drank and tried to maintain a positive outlook, convincing himself that he was one of the best optimists in the world. To explain why his furniture was wrapped in plastic, Edward mentioned his struggles with obsessive-compulsive disorder. He was very particular about avoiding dirt and dust. He wore latex gloves to minimize the need to wash his hands frequently. Edward cut out pictures of beautiful women from magazines, most notably a famous model named Heather Stewart White, whom he was obsessed with. He claimed to have dated Heather in the late 80s and early 90s until she moved to New York. However, investigators were skeptical of Edward's claims about his relationships with women. Heather herself denied ever dating Edward and stated that she didn't know him at all. She also offered her condolences to the victim's family. The police suggested that Edward may have targeted India at the bar because she resembled Heather. The autopsy indicated that India died around 3 a.m. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation along with blunt force trauma to the head. The pathologist dismissed the possibility that India could have accidentally sustained such an injury from a fall and then sat and laughed afterward. It was a fatal injury. Furthermore, she had over 50 bruises, cuts, and scrapes on her body, suggesting she had been beaten. Experts also concluded that these injuries could not have been accidental. The toxicology report revealed that India had a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit. Edward's DNA was found under India's fingernails, contradicting the suspect's claim of a consensual relationship. Edward's trial began in July 2016. India's parents chose not to attend the proceedings because they couldn't bear to hear the details of India's murder. Edward's defense attorneys aimed to portray him positively, describing him as modest, quiet, and calm, with a good reputation at work. Edward and his lawyers claimed that India's death was accidental, asserting that their interactions were consensual and that he was not guilty. However, the prosecution disputed these claims, arguing that the injuries sustained by India indicated violence. They stated that while at his house, India refused to engage in intimate relations with Edward, which caused him to lose control. He then attacked her, strangled her until she lost consciousness, and began to abuse her. At some point, India regained consciousness and found him on top of her. She attempted to push him away and fought back, but he struck her on the head, likely with a bottle, resulting in her death. During the trial, 2 witnesses testified against Edward, revealing troubling information about him. One witness, a neighbor, shared that he had previously drunk with Edward at a bar. The neighbor recounted that Edward claimed he had been trained to kill with his bare hands while in the army, and that he struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. The neighbor described an incident where Edward, after drinking, became aggressive. Edward lost control and attacked the neighbor, who had to hold him back as he started to choke him. The neighbor feared for his life during the encounter and decided to distance himself from Edward afterward. The second witness was a woman who had been attacked by Edward when she was a teenager. He grabbed her, began to strangle her, and attempted to kiss her. Fortunately, she managed to push him away and escape. Although she never reported the incident to the police, it left a lasting impact on her life, making it hard for her to trust and interact with men. When she saw Edward's face on television in connection with the case of India, she recognized him and decided to go to the police to share her story. Her testimony was crucial for the court, as it helped the jurors understand how a seemingly ordinary accountant could become a monster. Edward denied all witness testimonies. The prosecutor highlighted that Edward had intentionally given the taxi driver an address at the end of the street to conceal which house they were visiting, revealing his premeditated plan for the crime. Ultimately, the jury found Edward Tenniswood guilty. He will serve at least 30 years in prison for murder and 12 years for abuse, both sentences to run concurrently. At the age of 82, he would be eligible to appeal his sentence. During sentencing, the judge emphasized that this was a horrific crime, driven by the defendant's desire to fulfill his fantasies with a much younger and attractive girl. It was an act of extreme depravity. He assaulted India while S was incapacitated by alcohol, rendering her unable to defend herself. After being incarcerated, Edward reported to his lawyer that he was experiencing mistreatment and beatings from other inmates. He expressed feeling vulnerable and at risk. Despite filing several appeals, all of them were denied. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, United States. She grew up in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced adulthood early. At the age of 16, she became pregnant but was determined to be a good mother. Danielle's relationship with Carl, the father of her child, ended in divorce. In 1996, she gave birth to her son Tristan at the age of 17, and despite the difficulties ahead, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. Then she met Luis Payano, a man who would become Tristan's father. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers, initially as friends, but their relationship developed into love. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and for a time, it seemed like all their problems had been solved. The couple moved in together, and Danielle secured an office job at a landscaping company, a position she was proud to have obtained. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. Her life was on the right track, with a loving son, a fiancé, and promising career prospects. On March 15, 1999, Luis returned home from work to find his fiancée, 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, lying lifeless on the bed in their Ashley Lakes apartment in Norcross, Georgia. Their young son, Tristan, was at daycare at the time. Luis immediately realized Danielle was dead due to her skin color and called 911. When the police arrived, Luis was waiting for them and reported what he had found. He explained that upon entering the apartment, he saw Danielle lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered she was dead. The police naturally suspected Luis, and they took him in for questioning while a team of officers thoroughly examined the crime scene. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed. Fully clothed, with a sock around her neck, this suggested that the perpetrator intended to kill her, leaving no chance for survival. The fact that the stocking was tied at the back indicated that the perpetrator was behind Danielle when they strangled her. The crime scene showed signs of disarray, with the bed messed up and a dresser drawer open. It's possible that the perpetrator took the stocking from Danielle's drawer. The contents of her purse had been dumped and rummaged through, leading police to consider the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, several valuable items, including cameras and jewelry, were left untouched. This led police to speculate that the perpetrator may have intended to steal something but encountered Danielle and decided to kill her to avoid being identified as a witness. The lack of forced entry at the front door and the locked sliding glass door in the backyard raised suspicions that the crime scene might have been staged. Despite searching the surrounding area, police found no evidence. After investigating the crime scene, police discovered that Danielle may have let the killer into her home voluntarily or that the killer had a key to the apartment. As a result, the prime suspect became Danielle's fiancé, Luis Payano. When police started questioning Luis, he displayed intense emotions. The police were aware that romantic relationships can sometimes escalate into anger, leading to devastating consequences. To begin the interrogation, they asked Luis about his whereabouts on the day of Danielle's death. Luis claimed he spent the entire day at work. He last saw Danielle when they both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but she returned briefly to retrieve something. According to Luis, Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management at work and seemed slightly distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day but couldn't reach her. Concerned, he called her co-workers, who told him she had gone out for lunch but failed to return to work. Luis then contacted their home, where he spoke to someone named Lise, who also hadn't heard from Danielle. Luis left work to check on Danielle at their home in the Ashley Lakes apartments. When he arrived, he found something unsettling: the front door was unlocked. Upon entering, he saw a jar on the floor. During the investigation into Danielle's death, police questioned Luis about his relationship with her. They asked if the couple had frequent arguments or domestic problems. Luis insisted that their relationship was good and that they loved each other very much. Clearly feeling confused, he became frustrated with the questioning, believing that the police were wasting their time by focusing on him. He insisted that they should find the real culprit, who was still at large. Police also spoke to Danielle's friends and family, all of whom sided with Luis. Luis and Danielle were madly in love and were planning their wedding. However, their happiness did not last long. During the investigation into Danielle's case, Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, providing him with a solid alibi and eliminating him as a suspect. During the interrogation, Luis said that Danielle's co-worker Jeff was showing her too much attention and she was unhappy about it. The police immediately went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss. Danielle's boss confirmed to the police that Danielle had complained about an employee named Jeff. Jeff was a middle-aged man who was a manager at the company. Danielle complained to her boss that Jeff was constantly hanging around her, interfering with her work, and behaving inappropriately. There was a significant age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40 years old and she was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch and Danielle told him that she had a fiancé. She refused to go to lunch with Jeff. The company where Danielle worked took her complaints seriously. On the day of her murder, she had a meeting regarding a complaint she had filed with management against Jeff. She was very nervous about it. She feared that her career might be in jeopardy because she was a new employee and Jeff was her manager. Her co-workers mentioned that Danielle had gone home for lunch after this meeting but had not returned. That gave the police a time frame for when Danielle's attack occurred. The investigation revealed Jeff's involvement, especially when it was discovered that he was absent from the office at the time of the crime and did not return until later in the evening. Police focused on Jeff as a suspect, possibly following Danielle home and attacking her when she opened the door, which would explain the lack of signs of entry. Jeff was called in for questioning and asked to describe his relationship with Danielle. He admitted that he invited her to lunch but denied his involvement in her death. Jeff didn't deny liking her, however. He claimed he had not behaved inappropriately towards Danielle and was surprised when she filed a complaint against him. The investigators asked him if Danielle's complaint was a reason for wanting to harm her. His first reaction to this question was anger. He was adamant that he wasn't the one who took her life. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have been the one who attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to him, he was with another colleague, and they were driving around the city solving some work issues. They had been together all day, so he couldn't be the one who took Danielle's life. Jeff told investigators the name of the coworker whom he claimed he was with at the time of the crime. The detectives met with this man, and he confirmed Jeff's words, thus they excluded another person from the list of suspects. The next day, investigators received the autopsy report and examined it in the hope of getting some clues that would help them track down the perpetrator. The cause of Danielle's death was asphyxia. It seemed evident that Danielle's attack had taken her by surprise. The investigators concluded that someone had come up to her from behind and pulled the stocking tight until she lost consciousness. After that, the perpetrator tied the stocking in a knot so Danielle could not regain consciousness. There were no defensive injuries on her body. In fact, there were no injuries at all except for the ligature mark on her neck. Perhaps Danielle didn't even see the face of the one who attacked her. The police found no evidence at the crime scene that could help identify the perpetrator. No shoe prints, no DNA, no fingerprints, no hair. There was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police had no new suspects, they returned to the version that what happened was a robbery that went wrong. They asked Louise to go through the apartment with them again. He carefully examined everything and said that nothing was missing from the apartment. All the things seemed to be in their usual places. However, a few days later, Lou called the police and said he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. He also drew the attention of investigators to another strange detail: the stocking that someone strangled Danielle with did not belong to her. According to Louise, she didn't wear stockings at all. It meant that whoever had done it had brought the stocking with them. Lacking any evidence, the investigators decided to look into Danielle's past. Perhaps what happened to her was connected with her past. They asked her friends about her previous relationships, in particular, her relationship with Carl, the father of her son Tristan. Her best friend told the police about Danielle's ex-boyfriend Eddie. She started dating him when she was already pregnant. Eddie was a violent guy, and as their relationship progressed, he became more domineering and tried to control all aspects of her life. It got to the point where he forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie deteriorated even more after Danielle gave birth to her son. Soon after, Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided it was time to end this relationship. She moved out and tried to start a new life, but Eddie had other plans. He did not accept rejection and behaved unpredictably. As a result, Danielle had to seek a restraining order against him. He violated it several times, called Danielle, parked near her house, and once even showed up at her work. Danielle's family told investigators that Eddie had called her several times in recent months. He told her to meet with him, but she always hung up. Eddie was the perfect suspect, so detectives tracked him down and brought him in for questioning. The man was hostile, and he wasn't eager to go to the police station. However, Eddie had an alibi. He said that Eddie was towing cars out of state at the time of the murder and that Eddie's boss, along with service logs and other receipts, could back him up. When the police confirmed his alibi, they released Eddie. 3 days after Danielle died, Danielle's neighbor, Kirk, called the police and told them about something that had happened to Kirk the week before the murder. Ms. Kirk said that recently in the apartment complex, residents often encounter a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker said he came to do a repair order. However, Ms. Kirk said that she felt very uncomfortable the whole time he was there because he kept staring at Kirk, as if he was more concerned with her than completing the repair order. The same thing happened to another woman. The maintenance worker insisted that he was there to change a light bulb, when the landlord said there were no bulbs to change. He mumbled and staggered, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," then backed up and walked away. Police investigations revealed that the complex had several maintenance workers, but the one who matched the descriptions of both women was Calvin Oliver, 42. According to records, Calvin had only started working at the complex in September 1998. At the time of Danielle's murder, 10 residents had reported cash, checks, and other valuables, including jewelry, computers, and guns, missing from their apartments without evidence of forced entry. Some even suggested that someone on the maintenance staff was responsible. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by the police, who initially asked him about a series of burglaries at the Ashley Lakes apartments. Calvin denied any involvement in the burglaries. When asked about Danielle Jennings, he said he had heard about what happened to her but did not know her. The only thing he confessed was that he had worked in her apartment. The police were about to release Calvin for lack of concrete evidence when they ran a final check of Calvin's database. The results were horrifying. They discovered that Calvin had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a theft charge related to the theft of a personal check. According to Georgia Department of Correction records, Calvin had a long-standing adult criminal record dating back to 1974. His convictions included multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery by force, and at least one count of forcibly pressuring a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, Calvin spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Given his extensive criminal history, it's surprising he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes Apartments. The police took Calvin Oliver into custody, which allowed them to thoroughly investigate his potential involvement in Danielle Jennings's death. As part of their ongoing inquiry into a string of thefts at Ashley Lakes' apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. During the search, they discovered stolen items from other residents. And the police discovered Danielle's wedding ring in his home. This discovery directly linked Oliver to Danielle's death. When the police questioned him about the wedding ring, Calvin claimed that he had stolen it about 3 weeks before Danielle's death. However, this claim was proven false. Calvin became a suspect and refused to cooperate with police after being caught lying. At trial, the prosecution argued that Calvin killed Danielle after she caught him breaking into her home. After a 5-day trial that ended on October 13, 2000, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. As a result, Calvin Oliver received a life sentence for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for the burglary. A subsequent investigation revealed that Ashley Lake Apartments management knew about Calvin's history of run-ins with the law and his lengthy criminal record. Despite this knowledge, they failed to conduct thorough background checks and failed to warn other residents when a series of burglaries occurred. When these facts came to light, Danielle's family filed a lawsuit against Ashley Lake Apartments that they argue that the evidence demonstrates a reckless disregard for the safety of others. After a trial, a jury returned a verdict of more than $13 million for Danielle's wrongful death. The complex's key policy was also flawed, prosecutors said. Employees had access to house keys, and the lockboxes containing keys to the complex's 240 apartments were often left unsecured. Calvin Oliver is now serving a life sentence in prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kira Steger. Kira Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois. She was the daughter of Marcy and Jay Kira, who described her as a bubbly, dedicated, and sweet person. Kira worked at the Mall of America, where she held positions at 2 stores, Wet Seal and, most recently, Delia's. Her co-workers were not only her best friends but also her family. She had a unique ability to see strengths in others that they had not yet seen. Kira had planned a bright and peaceful future. Unfortunately, her dreams came to an abrupt end when Kira mysteriously disappeared. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira had a shift. Her co-workers said she was feeling well and had plans to go out to dinner at a fancy restaurant with her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, after work. Kira and Jeffrey met 3 years ago and quickly fell in love. Kira and Jeffrey began a romantic relationship and eventually married, forming a happy and stable couple. Although they sometimes disagreed, they resolved everything in private, without letting anyone know about these disagreements. 2 days later, on Saturday, February 23, when Kira failed to show up for work, her co-workers became concerned because this was unlike her. Kira was always punctual, strict with herself and others, never late, and always kept to a schedule. When Kira could not be reached, her co-workers called Jeffrey, but he did not know where his wife was. Jeffrey said that Kira had left home the morning before and had not returned. He was not too worried because Kira had a habit of occasionally being absent for a day or two, often staying overnight at friends' or relatives' houses without notice. However, the bad weather with heavy snow that day may have worried him. Jeffrey thought that something might have happened to her on the road. Perhaps her car broke down and her cell phone ran out of battery. That same day, not receiving any news from his wife, Jeffrey reported her missing and contacted Kira's family. Her family was shocked by the mysterious disappearance of their loved one, and this was a huge shock for them. After receiving the report of Kira Steger's disappearance, detectives immediately began investigating. Investigators began by questioning Jeffrey and searching the nearby area. Detectives went to Jeffrey's home to talk to him. Jeffrey said that on Thursday, he and Kira wanted to spend time together. They had dinner, talked, went bowling, and then left the mall. According to Jeffrey, they both went home soon after because Kira planned to watch a movie. Jeffrey also told the detectives that his wife had left the house the following morning, Friday, around 8:30. A meeting had been scheduled at work that she had to attend. Kira was acting normally, and Jeffrey did not notice anything unusual. Jeffrey did not find anything unusual about Kira's occasional disappearances, although he did not know where she went or who she was spending time with. Jeffrey said that they had been having relationship problems for the past few months. However, he did not find it serious or alarming, but rather viewed it as the usual small arguments that occur in every family. The detective asked Jeffrey about who Kira might be seeing and whether she was in any other relationship. Jeffrey dismissed this idea, as he had asked Kira directly and she had denied it. According to Jeffrey, he truly loved Kira and trusted her. Investigators turned over all the information they had gathered about Kira and her car to the patrol team. Detectives also went directly to the Mall of America to verify Jeffrey's statements and look for clues. The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, is one of the largest malls in the world, with 520 stores, an amusement park, an aquarium, a movie theater, a golf course, and many other amenities. The mall has numerous security cameras, so detectives reviewed the footage of Kira leaving the company on February 21st. The video did not show anything unusual. Jeffrey's initial statement was very credible. He met Kira after work. They stayed in the mall for a while, then went down to the parking lot and left. There was no argument, and the evening went smoothly. Waiting without knowing what had happened was difficult, and each passing day made Kira's family more and more worried about her safety. With no word from her, Kira's family traveled to Bloomington to help with the investigation. They printed flyers with Kira's picture on them, posted them on utility poles, and handed them out to passers-by. Their goal was to attract as much attention as possible to find Kira. They knew they couldn't just stand by and had to take action to find their loved one. While Kira's family was handing out flyers, the investigators continued their investigation. While interviewing neighbors, the police discovered a surveillance camera on a neighbor's home. The camera was pointed at Kira and Jeffrey's home. The investigators asked the homeowner to copy the footage from the camera because they hoped to find clues in it. Meanwhile, records from a cell phone company provided them with a new lead. According to phone records, Kira was in a relationship with someone other than Jeffrey. That person was Ryan Wendt, the manager of the chain of stores where she worked. They had a deep relationship and corresponded frequently. Police determined that Ryan had left the state and that when the search for Kira began, Ryan was driving to Colorado. This man was closely related to the investigation because, in addition to his relationship with Kira, he was out of state at the time of her disappearance. It could be a coincidence, or there could be something else going on behind his departure. Investigators needed answers. After several attempts, detectives were able to contact Ryan. He said the last time he had contact with Kira was when he was driving through South Dakota and texting her. These messages were sent shortly before Kira went missing. After reviewing the timestamps, detectives determined that Kira had contacted her new lover while she was having dinner with her husband. The messages showed that Kira had become increasingly distant from Jeffrey. Investigators ran a cell tower location check on Ryan's phone and checked his credit card statements. The results showed that he was indeed out of state that night and had no connection to Kira's disappearance. As a result, Ryan was released and cleared as a suspect. The timestamps on the messages showed that Kira was still texting Ryan even after she returned home to her husband. However, after 11:44 p.m., their conversation stopped, and Kira's phone was no longer active. Meanwhile, another investigation team was preparing to review video from a surveillance camera installed at Kira's neighbor's home. The camera captured most of the street scene from left to right. However, it rotated so quickly that it was difficult to observe. If the camera saw something suspicious, it immediately moved in another direction. Jeffrey and Kira's house was only visible for a few seconds when the camera panned to the right. Jeffrey said that after dinner and bowling, he and Kira went home, watched a movie, and went to bed. However, when investigators reviewed the footage, they discovered that just after 2 a.m., Kira's car backed into the driveway. Because the footage was poor and the camera kept moving, it was difficult to determine exactly what was happening at that time. The car then left the house. Jeffrey explained that Kira had asked him to fill up her car with gas for work the next day, so he went to the gas station. Surprisingly, this story was true. He was seen at the gas station around 3:30 a.m. However, detectives discovered that after leaving the gas station, he headed toward the highway instead of home. It is unclear where Jeffrey went next. The neighbor's camera did not record him returning, but this may have been a coincidence since the camera was always moving. Therefore, in theory, Jeffrey could have gotten home later since the camera was capturing a different angle. When investigators reviewed the video, they saw Kira's Chevrolet leave at 9:21 a.m. Unfortunately, they couldn't determine who was driving. A missing person report was filed on Saturday, February 23rd, and on Monday, February 25th, police received a call about a suspicious car parked near the shopping center where Kira worked. There are 2 multi-story parking lots there. A security guard found the car parked for several days and asked for it to be towed. When the driver inspected the car before towing it, He noticed suspicious red stains on the trunk lid and immediately called the police. That car turned out to be Kira's white car. Although there wasn't much blood, just a few small stains, it was still very concerning. In the car, they found Kira's wallet and a divorce form downloaded from the internet. Additionally, a dark object in the snow behind the car caught the attention of the investigators. As they approached, they found a rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains. DNA testing confirmed that it was Kira Steger's blood. The investigators were devastated to realize that Kira was most likely dead. This heartbreaking news was a huge shock to her family and friends. Their last hope of seeing Kira again was dashed, leaving them with questions. How did she die? Was she in pain? Who could hate her enough to take her life? The fact that Kira's body had not been found added to the confusion, as the endless grief seemed unlikely to be alleviated. The detectives made it a top priority to find out who had left the car in the parking lot. The car left the house at 9:21 a.m., and about 20 minutes later, it was caught on a mall camera. There were no cameras in the parking lot where the car was found, but another camera recorded the road leading to the lot, which was located near where Kira's car was parked. After reviewing the camera footage, detectives found that a hooded man appeared a few minutes after Kira's white Chevrolet pulled into the lot. It was cold enough that it was not unusual for him to be wearing a hoodie, but detectives wanted to learn more about where he went. The hooded man was seen walking across the street and approaching a taxi stand. He briefly chatted with a driver, then got into a cab and drove away. Police were able to determine the company that owned the taxis in the mall parking lot. Based on the time he spent talking to the drivers, police were able to determine the license plate numbers. All of the taxis had GPS tracking devices, which showed that the man ended up about a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house and left after paying in cash. As the taxi left the neighborhood, it was caught on camera, the same camera that had filmed part of Kira and Jeffrey's house. 2 minutes later, a man in a hoodie entered the frame. The low resolution of the video made it difficult to identify his face, but the white logo on his shirt was clearly visible. As investigators continued to examine the video, they saw the man enter Kira and Jeffrey's house. Kira was missing, leading to suspicions that the hooded man might be Jeffrey. After obtaining a search warrant, the police went to the house. At first, the house looked normal and unremarkable. However, upon closer inspection, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in Kira and Jeffrey's bedroom. There were several on the wall near the bed and about 100 on the mattress. It was clear that the bedroom had been rearranged and cleaned recently. When the forensic team sprayed luminol, the carpeting glowed. There were bloodstains throughout the house that were not visible to the naked eye. The bloodstains originated in the bedroom and extended to other areas of the house. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kira, leading investigators to believe that she was no longer alive. In addition to searching the house, police also searched Jeffrey's car. There were no bloodstains or signs of a struggle. However, they found one interesting detail: a gas station receipt in Jeffrey's car, dated 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned in the mall parking lot. According to the receipt, the transaction was made using Jeffrey's card. Detectives went to the gas station to review the security cameras. The camera recorded Jeffrey filling up with gas, then going inside to withdraw money from an ATM. The video clearly showed Jeffrey's face and a logo on his jacket that looked similar to the logo on the man in the earlier footage. With video evidence and all the evidence in the house, Jeffrey Trevino, 39, was arrested. He was taken to the police station for questioning and is now the prime suspect. Immediately after being released from the interrogation room, Jeffrey contacted a lawyer and was advised to exercise his right to remain silent. The police had enough evidence to charge him, but the most compelling evidence was Kira's body. no one suspected Kira was dead at the time. Police, Kira's family, and volunteers searched for her for months. In late March, as the snow melted, a volunteer found a strange bag on the edge of Keller Lake a few miles from Jeffrey's house and called the police. The bag contained a bloody pillow, a shirt, and a bra. The forensic team linked these items to Kira because her DNA was found on them. The lake remained frozen, hampering the search. However, when divers surveyed the water, they found no remains. The area around the lake was searched several times with 4 cadaver dogs, trained to find dead bodies, but to no avail. 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, on May 8, 2013, the St. Paul Police Department received a disturbing call. The caller reported that he had seen what appeared to be a body in the Mississippi River. Police discovered and recovered a body. The body was naked. Dental records identified it as Kira Steger. She had suffered severe trauma to the forehead and a broken left index finger. Because the body was so badly decomposed, the medical examiner was unable to determine the exact cause of death. Using new evidence, investigators attempted to reconstruct a timeline of the events leading up to Kira's death and the events that followed. They believed that when Kira and Jeffrey returned home, Jeffrey found her texting with someone else. When Kira refused to show her husband the messages, he snatched the phone from her and broke her fingers. After reading the romantic messages, Jeffrey became even angrier, and in a fit of rage, he killed Kira and tried to cover up the crime. He drove Kira's car to the house, put the body in the trunk, then went to the gas station before taking the body to the riverbank and dumping it. He then returned home, discarding the bag containing Kira's pillow and clothes along the way. The next morning, he went to the gas station to withdraw cash from an ATM, knowing that after leaving Kira's car in the shopping center car park, he would need cash to pay for a taxi. After leaving Kira's car, Jeffrey went home and spent the day cleaning. He tried to make it look like Kira had driven away that morning and that nothing had happened. However, this plan was foiled by surveillance cameras. In October 2013, a jury convicted Jeffrey Trevino, 39. They accepted that his actions were not intentional and that they were the result of a heated after discovering that his wife was having an affair. Before the judge handed down his sentence, Kira's family spoke out. "This monster was a calculating criminal," said Carrie Ann Steger, Kira's sister. "He deserves no mercy." Kira's mother, Marcy, said Jeffrey showed no sympathy for her daughter. "He dumped my daughter like a piece of trash into the most polluted water in the country," she said. But her father, Jay, said, "No punishment can ever make up for the pain Jeffrey has caused our family. No amount of time for Jeffrey is enough, never enough," he said. In November 2013, Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2031. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Information about her family and childhood is limited. She grew up in the Cuban with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. From a young age, Samadi attended a local school and showed a complex personality. Samadi stood out for her beauty and knew how to take advantage of her appearance. However, due to her ambition and vanity, she put material and personal interests first, disappointing many people. She was also very jealous and aggressive when she was young. Thanks to her doll-like appearance, Samadi Fonseca worked for many years as a Barbie in a large bookstore of the Universal Company. The nickname Barbie stuck with her ever since. After graduating from high school, Samadi began a relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Belier, a successful journalist working for a local television station. Osvaldo was 16 years older than Samadi. This was Samadi's longest and most serious relationship, but Osvaldo never proposed to her. In 1996, they had a son, Christopher, and a year later, a daughter, Christina, was born. Due to scandals and jealousy, Samadhi and Osvaldo divorced in 2012. In 2013, Osvaldo died at the age of 53 without leaving a will for Samadhi. Not accepting this, Samadhi decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to Osvaldo's old house, occupied it, and changed the locks to prevent his family and heirs from entering. In addition to seizing the property, Samadhi also took some of Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was extremely angry and immediately sued Samadhi for theft. The police forced Samadhi to leave the house, but no criminal proceedings were initiated against her. Samadhi had several relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a third daughter, Maria. Some sources claim that they were married but divorced after a few years. However, other sources claim that Samadhi was not married, but simply gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his consent. Many strange events have been discovered. Some Barbie lovers have gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances. However, this has not been noticed for a long time. For example, one of Samadhi's lovers went missing after breaking up with her. To this day, this person has not been found. Many suspect Samadhi's involvement, but there is no concrete evidence. Another case is Diaco, also Samadhi's former lover. He was murdered after breaking up with her. The case looked like a failed robbery. The perpetrator was never caught. Again, people suspected Samadhi was involved, but there was no clear evidence. The most famous victim believed to be linked to Samadhi was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native, was born in December 1992 in San Jose. He did not know his biological father because he left the family before he was born. Gerardo's mother, Ana Patricia, later married a man named Hermes Rodriguez. Hermes adopted Gerardo and loved him as his own son. A few years later, Gerardo had a younger sister named Milena. His childhood and youth were quite peaceful. He attended a normal school, loved motorbikes, and soon found true love with a girl named Carol. At the age of 23, Gerardo, his wife and 4-year-old daughter Genesis Cruz moved to live with his aunt and uncle in the suburbs of San Sebastian. He worked at a local bakery to support his family. Gerardo and Carol was happy and were expecting a second child. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadhi, a regular customer at the bakery. Samadhi was 40 years old but still attractive, liked to dress provocatively and flirt with men. Notably, she started having affairs with much younger men, probably because she enjoyed the attention they received. Despite the age difference of nearly 20 years, Gerardo quickly became infatuated with this beautiful woman and began dating her secretly. She often came to the bakery, almost every day, to meet her young lover, attracting the attention of other employees. Samadhi was often accompanied by his eldest daughter Christina, who was 19 at the time. Initially, Gerardo skillfully balanced his family life with his secret meetings with his mistress. Both women were unaware of each other's existence. However, Gerardo gradually became careless and began telling his friends and colleagues about Samadhi, praising her as a great mistress and giving him gifts. Rumors of Gerardo's relationship soon reached his mother, who tried to convince her son to leave his mistress. However, Gerardo and Samadhi's relationship only lasted a few months and ended in October 2015, when Samadhi discovered that Gerardo had a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Samadhi was furious and began calling and texting Gerardo's wife, Carol, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo if he did not stay with her. Gerardo begged his wife for forgiveness and wanted to keep the family together. He did not take Samadhi's threats seriously, thinking that she would quickly cool down and find a new boyfriend. He did not expect how vengeful Samadhi would become. Just a few days after the breakup with Samadhi, while walking on a downtown street, Gerardo discovered an older man secretly filming up a young woman's skirt. Gerardo was angry and decided to record the incident with his phone. He then approached the woman, explained the situation and advised her to call the police. Next, he chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to capture his face. Finally, the man fled in a taxi. That evening, Gerardo posted a video of the incident on his personal website. After just one night, the video went viral online. Netizens quickly identified the elderly man in the video as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former finance ministry official. The video quickly spread across media, turning Gerardo into a national celebrity. He was repeatedly invited to interviews in newspapers, on television and on radio to recount the incident, condemn the former official's actions and affirm that he had no regrets about what he had done. Meanwhile, a team of talented lawyers hired by Luis began to legally attack Gerardo. They accused him of violating the law by distributing the video and were preparing to sue him. Gerardo was surprised and confused by the situation, not knowing why he was being tried instead of the man who had committed a depraved act with an innocent girl. On October 7th, Gerardo gave his final interview on a local radio station. He was confident in his views and did not feel nervous. The next day, Gerardo planned to meet his friend Oswald after work, but cancelled, citing an emergency. It was later revealed that Gerardo had received a text message from Somadi that day. In the message, she had lured him to the park that evening with the promise of another interview. Gerardo trusted his ex-girlfriend completely and did not suspect anything. After work, he went to the meeting place, but instead of meeting the journalist, he was attacked by 2 strange men. They robbed him of his bag, beat him and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before running away. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo called his friend to tell him the news. The friend immediately called the police and an ambulance. Thanks to timely treatment, Gerardo was taken to the hospital. Doctors tried to save his life for 42 days. During this time, Gerardo underwent many surgeries, but ultimately did not survive. On November 19th, Gerardo passed away in the intensive care unit. Since Gerardo had just become famous before the tragedy, the news of his condition attracted national attention and was not exaggerated. Gerardo's family gave interviews, asking people to pray for his recovery. They did not understand why someone would attack Gerardo. Many people attended the funeral to express their condolences to the family. People hoped that the police would soon catch the culprit and give him a fair trial. There were initially many theories about the case. One theory was that it was a robbery-murder, because Gerardo was attacked in the park in the evening, his bag was stolen and he was stabbed with a knife. However, a few days before, Gerardo released a shocking video involving a famous former official, which could be related to the case. Therefore, the second theory was that it was a revenge murder. The media reported that Luis Solmano Delgado may have hired a hitman to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The case caused a heated debate in the press and people protested to demand the arrest of the culprit. The police began to investigate various theories and look for Gerardo's enemies. The investigation went dormant for months until May 2016, when a security camera video was discovered. The video showed 2 men running away from the crime scene. They immediately became prime suspects, but the police needed to identify and arrest them. The video became crucial evidence and, when released, helped move the investigation forward. The video was repeatedly shown on the news, urging viewers to look out for dangerous suspects. Police sketched the suspects and their physical features. Not long after, one suspect turned himself in and cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a reduced sentence. Thanks to his information, the investigation quickly identified other accomplices and the masterminds. All those involved were arrested, including Somadi and his daughter Cristina, the masterminds, Ronald Arce Barrientos, the taxi driver, Cesar Chavez Cerdas, who acted as an intermediary, Omar Costa, the young miner who directly participated in the attack and followed the victim. The roles and connections of the participants in the case were determined through phone calls and text messages. Samadi was the mastermind who planned the entire incident in detail and recruited his daughter Christina to participate. They asked their friends Ronald and Caesar to find an assassin to kill Gerardo, disguising it as a robbery in the park at night. Omar also participated with the task of ensuring that the victim arrived at the right location. Samadi chose October 7th as the date of the murder. On that day, she contacted all the participants several times, assigning roles and ensuring that everyone followed the plan. The young woman also asked them to bring her some of her ex-lover's belongings as evidence after the crime. Gerardo, after finishing his shift, went straight to the park. He thought he was going to an interview, so he tried to arrive on time. However, at the meeting place, he was attacked and stabbed multiple times. The attacker took Gerardo's handbag and jacket, then gave these to the Samadi as evidence. The most important evidence against Samadi were text messages detailing the murder plan and the roles of each participant. She was so confident that she did not delete these messages. The motive for this serious crime was jealousy. She did not want to share her lover with his wife and decided that if she could not have him, no one could. She carefully planned and executed the criminal conspiracy with the help of her daughter. They were immediately arrested and denied bail due to concerns that they might flee the country. The other co-defendants were also detained before trial, except for Omar, the supervisor, and the youngest participant was handed over to the Juvenile Justice Department. The investigation lasted about a year and a half. It was not until December 2017 that the trial of all those involved in the criminal conspiracy began. Samadi has a criminal record and was once arrested for falsifying documents to receive state benefits, but was only fined. She assigned the surname of a former lover to the child without his consent. She then used the court to receive child support from this man for more than 3 years, until the fraud was discovered. Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and fined a large sum. However, because she has a young child, her sentence was reduced to 5 years of suspended imprisonment. At the trial, the victim Gerardo's wife confirmed that she knew about her husband's relationship with Samadi. She also said that Samadi had threatened to kill Gerardo, but he was not too worried about these threats. The main motive for the case was Samadi's jealousy and hurt, as she could not accept that her young lover wanted to stay with his wife. Through phone records, police discovered that Samadi and her daughter Christina had planned the crime together. After the security camera footage of the murders was released, Christina had a mental breakdown. She called her mother in tears and wanted to turn herself in, but Samadi reassured her that the investigation would never lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. The court sentenced Samadi to 30 years in prison, Christina to 25 years, Ronald to 25 years, and Caesar to 25 years. Of the killers, one was sent to a juvenile detention center, while another was still at large at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family received $140,000 in moral compensation. After the trial, they expressed their gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo's killers a fair sentence. Samadi and Christina's lawyers appealed to the Court of Appeals for a reduced sentence. The appeal hearing took place in November 2019. At the same time, Ronald. According to the testimony, Ronald participated in the massacre but did not know the details of the plan. Ronald and Caesar also appealed in hopes of having their sentences reduced. As a result, each participant in the crime had their sentence reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving a 25-year sentence in a women's prison in Costa Rica. In the summer of 2020, she registered her marriage to a woman named Lindsay Diaz Lopez, whom she met in prison. At the time of the registration, Lindsay had been pardoned and released from prison, while Samadhi still had to continue serving nearly 2 more decades of her sentence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chad Amelia. Chad Amelia was born in 1992 in Santa Clara, California, USA. His parents, of Irish descent, married young and then moved to the United States. They were eager to pursue the American dream, a common goal for millions. When they arrived in the United States, they found themselves isolated in a foreign country, with no one nearby to support them. Communication with relatives was only possible by phone. Despite the distance, the couple and their children remained determined and did not return to Ireland. Chad grew up with his younger brother Shane. They got along and supported each other from a young age. Following the example of their parents, difficulties shaped their characters, making them kind and fair. Both boys were always ready to help others in need. Chad, the eldest, was especially hardworking. He played baseball and football in high school, and when a coach noticed his talent, he was given a spot on the school team. This opportunity fueled his passion for sports, and he became a talented football player. After graduating from high school, he attended California State University, Chicago, graduating in 2018. Soon after, he joined Camarilla, an accounting firm. At the same time, he continued his studies in economics to improve his accounting skills. Known for being sociable and kind, Chad easily connects with people. One spring day in 2018, 20-year-old Chad was walking his dog in the park when he unexpectedly met Bryn Spetcher, a smart, friendly, and determined 27-year-old girl. Like Chad, Bryn is from Chicago, Illinois. She moved to Washington when she was older, making some changes to pursue her education and find a good job. Bryn was born with hearing problems and was nearly deaf from a young age, forcing her to wear a hearing aid. This made her feel out of place in the educational environment, leading to various challenges. However, it also fueled her desire to help others, as she tried to maintain a positive attitude. Despite the difficulties of moving to California, Bryn earned a degree in audiology, a significant accomplishment that she had long pursued. Her career was just beginning, and she quickly secured a position as an audiologist at a hospital in Los Angeles. She wanted to help others who, like her, faced hearing challenges. Bryn lived in California for about a year but was not sociable and often took time off from work, so she did not have a wide circle of acquaintances, communicating only with a few friends with whom she could spend weekends. Chad changed her life dramatically. They started talking and quickly realized that they had many common interests. Chad was very fond of his smart and attractive girlfriend. He often talked about her to his friends, and he expressed his happiness. She seemed pleased too, eager to share stories about him with her friends. They seemed like the perfect couple, visiting each other often. On May 27, 2018, Bryn went to her boyfriend's house, bringing along her beloved service dog. A husky guide dog. Her boyfriend, Chad, also had a dog, and the two animals got along well. The following weekend, about a month later, Bryn was planning a business trip to another city, so she wanted to spend some time relaxing with her Chad before the trip. And Chad lived in the Tarzana Oaks area of California. That evening, one of Chad's neighbors, a guy named Vinny, returned home around 2 a.m. He spent about half an hour with Chad and Bryn, who were watching their favorite TV series. Vinny then went to sleep in his room, while another neighbor slept, using earplugs and sleeping pills. That night, Bryn and Chad decided to smoke marijuana. In California, marijuana use is legal, having been legalized in 1996. Chad took a few breaths and quickly relaxed. Bryn at first, she didn't feel anything, so she tried again. This time, she felt terrible. Her mind went blank, her vision blurred, and she had trouble breathing. She told her boyfriend, who went into the kitchen to get her some water. She felt so bad that she feared for her life and asked Chad to stay with her. Chad, who had used before, didn't have the same problems and was calm enough to support her. Bryn admits that she thought she was going to die. She began hallucinating about dying in pain and felt like she wouldn't survive the night. She was angry at her boyfriend because he seemed fine and suspected that he was setting her up. In her hallucinations, he became the bad guy who orchestrated her death through drug use. She also heard voices in her head urging her to kill him, and Bryn realized that the only way she could survive was to get rid of her boyfriend. Suddenly, she stood up and went into the kitchen, where she picked up a large knife. Bryn returned to the living room, where Chad was still lying on the couch. She stabbed him multiple times in the chest. At that moment, she heard voices urging her to continue stabbing. She couldn't resist them because she felt out of control. Bryn experienced a fierce cruelty and aggression she had never felt before. The hallucinations continued, and with each stab, she felt relief. Meanwhile, the neighbors were in other rooms on the second floor. One was fast asleep and didn't hear anything. The second neighbor, Vinny, heard some rustling from downstairs, but there was no loud noise or screaming, so he didn't think much of it. Vinny assumed the couple was watching TV. After a while, he heard Chad's voice asking Bryn to leave him alone and call for help. The voice got louder and more frightening, which scared Vinny. To find out what was going on, he started going down from the first floor. When he walked in, the first thing he noticed was the frightened dogs. When he entered the room, he saw the furniture scattered everywhere. In the living room, Bryn had a knife in her hand, covered in blood. Chad lay there, wheezing, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Vinny. Chad's hand was slashed by her, defenseless, but Bryn, in her frenzy, stabbed him with a kitchen knife. A large gash across his chest that Bryn continued to attack with a look of fury on her face. Vinny yelled at her to stop, but instead, Bryn turned to look at him with a blank expression. She was still holding the knife. Feeling the danger, Vinny quickly went upstairs and knocked on the second neighbor's door to warn him. However, the neighbor was fast asleep and did not respond. So Vinny grabbed his cell phone and ran downstairs. Fearing for his life, he ran out onto the street and quickly called 911. Once outside, Vinny used his phone to call emergency services. His screams attracted the attention of the neighbors, who ran out to see what was going on, making Vinny feel safer. He started banging on the windows and shouting for the girl to stop. The neighbors, seeing the situation inside the house, also started shouting. Everyone was scared and shocked. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Bryn continued to attack Chad, not paying attention to the commotion outside. Within minutes, the police met Vinny, who was sobbing about the events that were happening. He could only point to the apartment where the violent attack was taking place. The police rushed into the house to intervene. In the living room, they found Bryn repeatedly stabbing a young man in the chest. The room was covered in blood, and although the young man showed no signs of life, Bryn did not stop. The police considered using force to end the attack. However, when ordered to drop the knife, Bryn began stabbing herself in the neck. The police quickly used a stun gun, but it was ineffective. Bryn continued to harm herself, so the police used a baton to disarm her. It took 9 blows to knock the knife out of her hand, even breaking her arm in several places, but she seemed completely unaware of the injuries. Only then did Bryn drop the knife. In addition to stabbing Chad, she also stabbed her dog several times. When other rescue services arrived, everyone was shocked by the horrific scene, which looked like a bloodbath. Doctors tried to resuscitate Vinny, but he was in shock and could not remember or explain what had happened in the house. The experience had a profound effect on him, and he needed a long recovery period with the help of psychologists. The dog was treated at a veterinary clinic and eventually recovered from his injuries. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, Chad was dead. There was a lot of blood from the stab wound and witnesses to the incident were present. These witnesses were neighbors who had come out of the house when they heard screams. They described what they saw to the police, but could not understand how such a brutal attack could have happened or what had provoked it. Chad had 108 stab wounds, most of them concentrated around the heart and neck. Some of the wounds were superficial and not life-threatening, while others penetrated vital organs. It is difficult to determine which specific wound caused Chad's death. He also had multiple self-defense wounds. Bryn after self-inflicted wounds to her neck. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on a ventilator and intubated. When police tried to communicate with her, they used only a piece of paper and a pen, as she was unable to fully respond because of the life support equipment. Once she was stabilized in the hospital, she was able to communicate fully. Various tests showed traces of mild substances in her blood. Doctors noted that the levels were very low and did not pose a threat to her life or mental health. It is unusual for such a small amount to cause such an extreme reaction. However, doctors did not rule out the possibility that her blood levels had dropped. When Bryn spoke to the police, she claimed that she did not remember anything that had happened. As a result, she did not know where Chad was or what had happened to him. She believed that her injuries may have been caused by an assault with the intent to rape her. In addition to the neck injury, she also suffered a broken neck and a bludgeoned arm, which was how the police safely disarmed her of the knife. However, she did not remember the event either. Bryn could not believe the police account of how she attacked and stabbed her boyfriend. Despite this, she did not seem to feel remorse for her actions toward Chad. Bryn refused to comment further and immediately requested a lawyer, as she considered herself innocent and blamed the incident on the effects of drugs. The last thing she remembered was being discharged from the hospital after 4 days, on May 31st, when she was immediately arrested for Chad's murder. Eventually, she was able to share a more detailed account of the events of that tragic night. Bryn recounted her story. She had gone to visit her boyfriend with a dog and they watched TV together. Around 10:30 p.m., when Chad stepped outside to smoke, she joined him, saying she wanted to try it too. She then began to feel unwell, hallucinating and hearing voices in her head. Bryn had difficulty breathing, felt disoriented and nauseous. She then had a hallucination blaming Chad for her condition. The hallucination urged her to kill Chad, claiming it was the only way to stop her bad feelings. Although she initially resisted, the hallucinations grew stronger. Feeling like she was going to die, Bryn attacked Chad with a knife but insisted that she had no control at the time, claiming she was innocent. When the police arrived, the hallucinations told her to harm herself. She complied with these voices. Bryn insisted that she could not resist because the voices in her head had complete control over her. She could not even drop the knife when the police asked her to, until they broke her arm. Bryn believed that she was suffering from drug-induced psychosis at the time. She was eventually charged with first-degree murder, but she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Preliminary hearings took place and her bail was set at $500,000, which she paid, allowing her to await trial at home. During this time, the police continued to investigate and Bryn's attorney repeatedly requested adjournments. And Chad's murder trial was set for October 23, 2023, but a new district attorney took office a month earlier, causing further delays. The trial finally began on November 9, 2023. The new prosecutor reduced her charges to manslaughter, which shocked the victim's family. They could not understand how someone could accidentally stab the victim more than 100 times. Remarkably, all of this took so long that Chad's mother did not live to see the trial and never saw justice. She passed away in 2020. The court psychiatrist concluded that Bryn suffered from a psychotic disorder caused by smoking. This decision was supported by other experts, and according to the prosecution, they did not have enough evidence to refute this conclusion. During the trial, Chad's family insisted that it was a deliberate massacre and demanded punishment. The defense argued that Bryn's behavior showed signs of psychosis. She was not aware of her actions, first stabbing her boyfriend and then hitting him multiple times. A police officer using a stun gun was unable to stop her, and they were only able to take the knife away after breaking her arm with 9 blows from her baton. This behavior showed that she was psychotic. However, according to Bryn, she understood what was happening. She remembered everything and claimed that she saw the murder as the only way to survive. She was aware of her actions and made her own decisions, despite experiencing hallucinations. Her arguments were strongly opposed by her attorneys. As a result, the defense continued to delay the trial, which lasted for 5 years. The main issues in dispute were whether there was intent to kill Chad and whether Bryn used the drug voluntarily. Under California law, a person can be held responsible for such crimes while under the influence of drugs or alcohol if it can be proven that the use was voluntary. If the drug was coerced, the killing is considered unintentional. This must be proven. The prosecution pointed to numerous letters from the girl, in which Bryn repeatedly told friends that she had been drinking. She also mentioned smoking occasionally, suggesting that this was not her first time using. The prosecution argued that on the day Chad was killed, she also used the drug voluntarily, as she had done before. Many colleagues defended Bryn, describing her as a very responsible person. She had no criminal record and no one could testify that she was capable of causing such a psychotic episode. However, this claim seems dubious, given her medical history, which should have made her aware of the potential consequences. She defended herself by saying that she was unsure what drugs her boyfriend had smoked and given her that night and believed he had given them to her intentionally. No other drugs were found in his home. Bryn's parents defended her, claiming that she had no romantic relationship with Chad and that she was acting in self-defense against harassment. They attempted to portray her as a heroine. However, friends on both sides disagreed, saying that Chad and Bryn had been together for nearly 2 months, had an intimate relationship, and that everyone knew about it. Chad's relatives denied any allegations of violence against him. They described him as respectful of women and noted that although he had a smoking habit, which his parents had advised him to quit, it was legal and had never caused any problems. They insisted he was not aggressive, so they did not believe he would attack his girlfriend. Throughout the trial, Bryn showed no remorse for what had happened. The only time she cried was when the brutal details of her arrest were described. She could recall the intense pain of being beaten with a baton. The case was complex, controversial, and attracted considerable public attention. Many were puzzled as to how a seemingly kind-hearted girl, dedicated to helping others, could commit a brutal murder. The jury then deliberated on the verdict. The jury then found Bryn Spejcher, 32, guilty of manslaughter. Bryn showed emotion for the second time during the trial. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. At that point, she was focused only on her sentence. She did not care that she had caused serious harm to her loved one. Bryn simply did not want to take responsibility for her actions. Chad's father spoke to reporters, expressing his frustration with the justice system's decision, which he considered unfair. He also pointed to inconsistencies in Bryn's testimony. She contradicted herself. For example, she initially described her boyfriend as a nice young man who was easy to talk to. However, when the subject of smoking was brought up, Bryn admitted that she had always been afraid of him and then began to deny that they had a relationship. Chad's father said that Bryn did not want to take responsibility for her terrible actions and tried to blame Chad for the bloody massacre to reduce her sentence. The father could not believe that the court would seriously consider that a person could accidentally inflict more than 100 wounds on another person. His son's death was not simple or painless. Chad had suffered a lot, and now the killer was trying to blame him with lies. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Bryn smoked of her own free will, and Chad had never forced her to take drugs when she did not like them. However, psychiatric experts confirmed that Bryn's psychosis was caused by the drug. This was one of the first cases where a voluntary user was justified in using drugs. And while awaiting the verdict, the girl was released on bail. On January 24, 2024, Bryn Spetscher was sentenced to 2 years of probation in order to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge justified the lenient sentence by stating that Bryn was not in control of his actions during a psychotic episode, making a reduced sentence appropriate. The attorney applauded the court's decision, calling it the right thing to do. However, Chad's father was unhappy with the ruling, arguing that the judge had set a dangerous precedent. He said the decision implied that marijuana users in California were being given a license to kill. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jaliyah Davis. The police officers who arrived at the scene were horrified by what they discovered. Body parts were scattered on the road, and the girl was found decapitated and missing a leg. Blood was splattered everywhere, creating a gruesome sight. But what had actually occurred? Jaliyah Davis was born in Colorado Springs in 1991. She has an older sister named Toby Davis. They had a close relationship, like best friends. Eventually, the family moved to Marietta, a small town of 13,000 people near the West Virginia border. After finishing school, Jaliyah took a job at a local store, aspiring to become an esthetician as her dream for the future. On Friday, November 18, 2011, 20-year-old Jaliyah left home around 6 p.m. to meet her friend Kristen. They planned to get ready for a party together at Brian's house, where Jaliyah would spend the night afterward. The girls dressed up, applied makeup, and styled their hair beautifully. Friends picked them up, and they all went to the party and then to the pool room in the park. Although Jaliyah didn't know the other friends very well, she enjoyed her time with Kristen. She texted her mom Kim updating her on their plans and saying they were having a great evening. Her last text was sent at 9:30 p.m. The party with Jaliyah's friends was still going strong. At 3:28 a.m., Toby received a call from Jaliyah, who was at the gas station. Toby was with a guy at the time and told Jaliyah that they were coming to pick her up. During the call, Toby heard Jaliyah ask Kristen to give her her keys, while Kristen mumbled something in the background. Then Toby and her lover went to the gas station. 5 minutes later, Jaliyah called Toby again, her tone angry and annoyed. She asked Toby to meet her somewhere else. While stopped on the highway, Toby asked Jaliyah what was going on. Jaliyah replied that it was not something to discuss over the phone and insisted on explaining in person. Toby could hear Jaliyah arguing with Kristen, accusing her of being a bad friend. Toby realized that the two friends had argued. Since they were in a hurry, Jaliyah decided to change direction and go to a location about 20 minutes away. Jaliyah urged older sister to hurry and yelled at Kristen, calling her terrible. Toby tried to calm her down, assuring her that they would be there soon as she and her lover ran towards them. 20 minutes later, Toby decided to call Kristen and ask what had happened to them. Before Kristen could reply, the connection was lost. Toby and her lover arrived at the designated location but could not believe their eyes. Several police cars had blocked the road. They stopped and asked the police what was going on. The police replied that there was a dead body of a girl on the road. It was an African American woman wearing a white coat. Toby looked at her boyfriend in horror. According to the description, it was Jaliyah. The police did not tell Toby anything else. In a panic, she called Kim, her mother, and the rest of the family, who quickly arrived at the scene. While waiting for her family, Toby called Kristen back. She said she saw something, then hung up. Toby tried to call Kristen back, but she didn't answer. Jalia's family, who had just arrived, began to press the police for information. Police confirmed that a body found on the highway was Jalia's, and that her identification was found with her. Her car was 300 meters away from where her body was found. Jalia had been decapitated, and some of her body parts were scattered on the road. Her family could see a white sheet covering some of her remains. They were in shock and trying to understand what had happened to Jalia. They had only spoken to her on the phone 20 minutes earlier, so they were confused by how quickly this tragedy had unfolded. A truck driver was driving down the road when he noticed a gruesome scene. Body parts were strewn across the highway. He immediately called 911 at 3:48 a.m. and remained at the scene waiting for police. To prevent other vehicles from driving over the remains, he began blocking oncoming vehicles. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the gender of the victim. When police arrived, they secured the area and began questioning the truck driver and other passing motorists, but no one was able to provide information. The drivers said they did not see anything suspicious, nor did they touch the remains for the victim's belongings. There were no cars parked nearby, and the reason the victim abandoned the vehicle remains unclear. Jalia was brutally killed. Her head was discovered in the bushes alongside the road. One of her legs was severed below the knee, and her right breast was missing. Fragments of brain were found on the nearby fence posts. The scene was horrifying. Jalia was barefoot and completely topless, wearing only torn jeans. Her clothing was neatly arranged on the fence. First her bra, then her shirt, and lastly her jacket. All the items were tattered and stained with blood. It remains a mystery who placed her belongings there. A car was discovered 300 meters from her body, crashed into a fence. Unlike the horrific condition of her body, the car appeared to be relatively intact. It was empty and running, with the doors locked and the headlights on, suggesting the driver had left in a hurry. The front passenger window was open and there were noticeable dents in the car. Blood was found on the license plate, in the trunk on the passenger side, and on the taillights. The police deemed her death suspicious and launched an investigation. Toby kept calling Kristen, who was the last person to see Jalia and had been with her before the incident, in hopes of getting an explanation. Kristen mentioned she had witnessed something, but the calls kept getting disconnected. After the police conducted their investigation, the family members visited the scene and took photographs. They found a boot print in the gravel. The following day, the police aimed to interview everyone who had been with Jalia that night, including Kristen and her friends, but could not locate Kristen. She also did not answer her phone. When police went to Kristen's house, her father responded, stating that she did not wish to speak to anyone and that they would be hiring a lawyer. 12 hours after Jalia's death, Kristen indeed hired a lawyer. She became the primary focus of the investigation, and her refusal to cooperate shocked Jalia's family. They suspected she was hiding something. Otherwise, she wouldn't be avoiding everyone, ignoring the police and her family, or hiring a lawyer so quickly. They also knew that Kristen was the granddaughter of the sheriff and had a history of altercations at a bar, where she was known for her temper, but her grandfather always covered for her. 3 days later, Kristen met with the police alongside her lawyer. She explained that she arrived home at 7 p.m. to prepare for the party. Afterward, she and her friends drove to Brian's house in Jalia's car, arriving around 10 p.m. The party had several unfamiliar faces, and people were drinking and socializing. Feeling bored, Kristen, Jalia, and 2 male friends went to pick up another friend, Katie, and get some more drinks. The 5 of them then returned to the party and continued drinking. Kristen and Katie's friends tried to stop Jaliyah from drinking more, but they were unsuccessful. Jaliyah ended up consuming about 15 shots. Initially, her friends didn't notice how drunk she was. She didn't fall and seemed to walk fine. They went to play pool, leaving Jaliyah at Brian's house. During the game, they noticed that Jaliyah was very drunk. The alcohol had taken a toll on her, causing her to act inappropriately. She flirted and danced with Katie's ex-boyfriend, making everyone uncomfortable. As the situation became more tense, Kristen decided it was time to leave. They left the pool hall around 3 a.m. Freddie was driving. Kristen was in the front passenger seat, and Jaliyah and Katie were in the back. They headed home but did not go inside. While the friends discussed their plans, Jaliyah was on the phone. After the call, she realized she could not find her bracelet and became upset, blaming Kristen for losing it. Kristen had actually carefully removed the bracelet in the pool hall and put it in her bag, but this only made Jaliyah angrier. Jaliyah got out of the car and called her sister to pick her up. Kristen then overheard Jaliyah calling her sister to change the meeting location. Jaliyah then moved her car and said she would wait for her sister, assuring everyone that she would stay in the car and not go anywhere. The friends then went to McDonald's. This was the last time they saw Jaliyah, and what happened to her after that is unknown. The police questioned several friends, including Kristen, who agreed to testify about the night of the incident. However, the police found many inconsistencies in their statements. Katie shared a similar story but added more details. After Jaliyah was dropped off, she went to Kristen's house. Katie heard Kristen talking on the phone with Toby. After that, they all went home. Katie met her ex-boyfriend Chris, and they spent the night together. The next morning, Katie learned that Jaliyah had died. She stated that she didn't blame Jaliyah for flirting with her boyfriend because she was drunk. Chris supported her claim, saying they were together that night, and he mentioned that he foolishly flirted with Jaliyah, who was bothering him. He noted that she was very drunk and struggling to stand, but he didn't witness any arguments between the girls that night. However, he also mentioned that Katie told him about a fight between Kristen and Jaliyah after they left the billiard room. Freddie, who drove the girls to the party, is the son of a police officer. He said he arrived at the party before the girls at 11 p.m., but Kristen claimed they were already there at 10 p.m. It's unclear who is telling the truth. They might have just misremembered the time. Freddie mentioned seeing a woman arguing with a white man in the billiard room, but he didn't know him. After the party, Freddie admitted he had been drinking a lot and drove them home. On the way, there was a disagreement about a bracelet. He stated they left Jaliyah in the car while they went to McDonald's. After that, he took Kristen home and then went to his own place. He was unsure how Jaliyah ended up on the highway. The police found the friends' testimonies confusing, particularly Freddie's, who insisted they had not given Jaliyah a ride. However, in the last call made when Jaliyah was on the highway, Kristen's voice was heard, suggesting they were together, possibly without Freddie, or that he was too drunk to recall what happened. As time went on without any arrests, many people started to think the police were not conducting an investigation. They dismissed the incident as an accident. Rumors spread throughout the city suggesting that Kristen and Freddie played a role in Jaliyah's death. Many people believe that her death did not appear to be a simple car accident. Her car showed only minor damage. A few dents, a slightly broken windshield, and a shattered front passenger window. However, there was no significant damage to explain how her body ended up 300 meters away from the vehicle. It seemed more plausible that she had exited the car and had been struck by someone. Additionally, it was puzzling why all of her clothes above the waist were removed and neatly hung on a nearby fence. To make matters more confusing, police later discovered a removable hood from Jaliyah's jacket in the bushes behind the fence. How did it get there, and why didn't the police catch it earlier? It was also odd that her body parts were found scattered across 2 lanes of traffic. Due to the extent of her injuries, her body had to be cremated. In 2012, Amber Stafford approached the police to report what she claimed to have seen on the night Jaliyah died. She said she met Jaliyah at a pool hall and observed a fight in the parking lot involving Jaliyah, 2 black men, and a white woman. According to Amber, after the confrontation, Jaliyah drove away while the men followed her in another car. Jaliyah attempted to escape from them, leading to a chase. Ultimately, the other car collided with Jaliyah's vehicle, and Amber witnessed her getting out before the attack occurred. Amber's account appears to contradict that of Jaliyah's friends and sister. Amber was offered a polygraph test but did not pass. During questioning, Amber confessed that she fabricated her story but did not provide a reason for it. As a result, she received a 6-month prison sentence and a $500 fine. In March 2013, the results of Jaliyah's autopsy were finally made public. Toxicology tests revealed no illegal substances, but the alcohol level in her blood was twice the legal limit. The Wood County Sheriff's Department concluded that Jaliyah's death was accidental. After her friends left, the Jaliyah did not wait for her sister, who was about to arrive. Instead, she started the car and drove away. Since she was drunk, she lost control of the vehicle. Traveling at a high speed of about 110 kilometers per hour, her car skidded to the right and crashed into the guardrail. Because she was not wearing a seatbelt, her body was thrown to the right and hit the windshield when the airbag deployed. She was ejected through the right front door window while the car continued to move. As she struck the guardrail pillars, she bounced back towards the car, causing her clothes to fly off. She flipped over the car, hitting the roof and trunk, which had blood on it, before being thrown away from the vehicle. A car may have been driving down the road at night and, in the darkness, failed to notice a body, running over it and dragging the remains across the road, leaving behind many fragments. This scenario seems implausible. Jaliyah's family did not accept it. They believed their daughter's body couldn't have traveled such a distance. Even if she had been struck by the car, she wouldn't have landed on the hood or trunk. The roof showed no dents that would have resulted from a body hitting it at impact. The police also confirmed that there were no blood, hair, or fibers from her clothing on the pieces of the broken passenger door. No glass was found in Jaliyah's hair or head, so her family does not think she collided with broken glass on the door before being thrown out the window. There was no significant damage to the fence that the police reported the car had crashed into. However, this detail doesn't explain how the victim's clothes were neatly hung on the fence. If she had accidentally ended up there, her belongings would have been out of order, with her underwear on top. Instead, the shirt and underwear appeared to be intentionally torn. It's also puzzling why the car doors were locked. Typically, when the airbag deploys in this model, the doors unlock automatically, so someone must have closed them. A member of Jaliyah's family expressed surprise that physical evidence was left at the scene after the police investigation. Clothing, including underwear, a t-shirt, and a jacket, were still hanging on the fence, and no one had collected them for evidence or conducted DNA testing. In addition, the hood of Jaliyah's jacket, which had blood on it, was left in the bushes. An earring belonging to Jaliyah was found 5 meters from her body, also left on the road. Police did not search for fingerprints or DNA on any of this evidence. Jaliyah's car was towed away by police and parked outside without being properly inspected. Another strange detail was that Jaliyah's favorite keychain, decorated with J-shaped gemstones, a gift from her sister Tabi, was missing. Jaliyah always wore it on her keychain. It was not found at the scene, and it was later discovered that Kristen had it. Kristen claimed that Jaliyah had given it to her, but no one believed Kristen. Jalaiah was very careful with her belongings, especially her jewelry, and even argued with Kristen over a bracelet. It would have been absurd for her to give such an expensive keychain. Taubie also recalled that Jalaiah had asked for her keys in a phone call. Kristen had the keychain attached to the same set of keys. Kristen's attorney eventually returned the keychain to Jalaiah's family. The individuals in the car that night were never considered suspicious or questioned. Their phones were not collected for testing because Kristen, Katie, and Freddie provided alibis, stating that they were at McDonald's when Jalaiah died. Surveillance camera footage from McDonald's shows a car similar to Freddie's arriving at 3:32 a.m. Freddie picked up his order at the drive-thru, but it is unclear who else was in the car. McDonald's employees have mentioned that the timestamp on the records does not accurately reflect reality, although it is unclear exactly how much of a discrepancy there is. Since Jalaiah called Taubie while they were on the freeway at 3:33 a.m., and Kristen argued, it is possible that they were still on the freeway at that time. It is also possible that the time Freddie's car was at McDonald's was accurate, and Kristen was not in Freddie's car. Despite this apparent inconsistency, the police did not verify the exact time they arrived at McDonald's and accepted this testimony, removing all suspicion from all three. The family of the Jalaiah received Shikar and carried out their own inspection. They found a significant amount of blood underneath the car. A car hit her and dragged her along the road, which is why there was blood left under the vehicle. The blood found on the road supports this account. The airbag designed to protect the driver deployed, but the one for her did not activate. There was no DNA from Jalaiah found, suggesting she did not come into contact with her airbag. It was discovered that the passenger airbag was faulty and did not function in the car. Additionally, a drop of blood belonging to someone else was found, but its source is currently unknown. The family of the Jalaiah believes she was the victim of a crime that night. They suspect she was struck by the same car, and after the impact, her head hit a fence post, leading to her death. The car injured her severely, resulting in her head and leg being torn apart. Jalaiah's family is working hard to seek justice for her, but so far, the case is still closed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Courtney Schulhoff. Courtney Schulhoff was born in 1987 in Florida to Stephen and Tracy. While details about her childhood are limited, we do know that her parents divorced when she was young, which was a challenging experience for her. After the divorce, her mother moved out and Courtney stayed with her father. Eventually, Stephen faced significant financial problems, which led to their move. In 2003, Courtney attended Lyman High School. She was a hardworking student at first, but after her parents divorced, her grades began to drop rapidly. She rarely attended school, stopped trying, and became a poor student. Outside of school, Courtney's personality also changed. She began hanging out with a group of friends who were known for bad behavior, which negatively affected her. Tensions between Courtney and her father Stephen escalate, forcing her to temporarily move in with her mother Tracy. However, this arrangement does not last long. Tracy cannot accept the changes in Courtney, so Stephen has no choice but to welcome her back home. Once again, Courtney and her father face unresolved issues, including her difficulties with school. During this time, Courtney and her friends often gather at the racetrack across from her school, where she meets and begins dating a 20-year-old college student named Michael. Michael Morin was a former high school football player who, unlike Courtney, had performed well academically. He received straight A's and was now attending a nearby college. His parents had high expectations for him, but everything changed after he met Courtney. After a few weeks of talking, they began spending all their free time together. Courtney's father, Stephen, was extremely upset about her poor grades, and this only intensified when he learned about her decision to be with Michael. He quickly started blaming Michael for this choice. Their relationship was already strained, and this situation made it worse. Courtney felt that her father didn't want her to be happy. She tried to explain that Michael was a good person, but Stephen refused to see him in that way. He had heard rumors about Michael being involved in car theft and wanted to caution Courtney that no matter what Michael did, he would never earn her father's approval. After a series of arguments, Courtney began to accuse her father of being abusive, and there was some evidence to support her accusations. One day, when Courtney invited some friends over, including Michael, her father Stephen came home earlier than expected, leading to an altercation. While Courtney and her friends were drinking and smoking, Stephen suddenly entered the room. Enraged, he yelled at his daughter for throwing a party without his permission. After a brief argument, Stephen punched Courtney in the face in front of her friends. The situation between Courtney and her father, Stephen, remained tense. Although Courtney had stopped going to school, she refused to find a job and frequently used her father's credit card without asking. She would come home with new clothes and items purchased online. By this time, Stephen's financial situation had worsened, making things even more challenging. For several months, Courtney continued her troubling behavior, often sneaking Michael into their home at night while her father was asleep. Eventually, Stephen prohibited Courtney from seeing her boyfriend, but she ignored his wishes and invited Michael over whenever she pleased. Every conversation between Courtney and her father focused on his harsh criticism of Michael. As the months passed, the situation became increasingly difficult. One day, Stephen checked his bank account and noticed some money missing. He called the police, reporting his daughter to them, apparently to teach her a lesson. After speaking with the police, Courtney returned home, now much more afraid of her father. She began to see him as strict, unkind, and a real threat. She devised a plan, determined to break free from Stephen's control. By the end of 2003, Stephen was in a relationship with a woman named Elaine. During this same time, Courtney was working towards earning her high school diploma while continuing to date Michael. Frustrated by Courtney's father's efforts to control their relationship, the couple decided to run away. However, they faced a major obstacle. Neither had a car or any money. Their plan was to take Michael's father's car and drive to Maryland, where they could ask Courtney's grandparents for financial assistance. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Michael stole his father's car, but while on the way to Maryland, they changed their minds and turned back home. This decision led to serious consequences for both Michael and Courtney. Michael's parents reported him to the police, and he was charged with car theft, resulting in a 70-day. Furthermore, Michael's parents insisted that he end his relationship with Courtney, believing it to be detrimental to him. This relationship was indeed harmful to both of them. Michael was forced to break up with Courtney, but he refused. As a result, his parents decided to kick him out of the house, leaving him homeless. He began sneaking into Courtney's apartment to sleep there, something he had done occasionally before, but now happened every night. Additionally, Michael dropped out of college, changed his address to Stephen's, and put Stephen's phone number on his parole application without Stephen's involvement or permission. Although Michael had nowhere to live, he made no attempt to find a job, which left Courtney to pay all of her father's credit card bills. When Stephen attempted to talk to his daughter about her mounting debt, an unforeseen tragedy struck first. On February 10, 2004, Elaine, Stephen's new girlfriend, attempted to call him multiple times, but he didn't answer. Concerned that something might be wrong, she decided to go to his house. Between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m., she drove to his place and was surprised by what she saw. Michael, Courtney's boyfriend, was walking down the street with Stephen's dog, wearing one of Stephen's t-shirts. Feeling uneasy, Elaine got out of her car and approached the front door of Stephen's house, where she found Courtney standing by the entrance. Elaine tried to enter, but the door was locked. She asked Courtney where her father was, but Courtney said she didn't know and left without opening the door, taking the key with her. Elaine saw that Stephen's truck was still parked in its usual spot, which made her even more worried, so she decided to call the police. When the local police arrived, they quickly obtained a search warrant following Elaine's phone call. They entered the house through the back door and began their search, uncovering a horrific scene. Inside Stephen's room, they found blood splatter on the walls. The most shocking discovery was Stephen's body in a plastic trash can. He had a severed ear and a disfigured face. It was clear that the perpetrator didn't bother to hide their actions. Additionally, the police found several bank statements on the dining room table, many of them circled in pen. Meanwhile, Courtney was missing. Elaine learned of the altercation between Stephen, his daughter, and her boyfriend, so the police quickly began a search. The police found Michael in the restroom of the mall across the street from Stephen's house. As Elaine said, he was wearing one of Stephen's t-shirts and had Stephen's wallet, car keys, and credit cards in his possession. The police took Michael in for questioning. After leaving her father's apartment earlier that day, Courtney simply went to her mother's house, where her mother made her turn herself in. During questioning, Michael initially insisted that he knew nothing about the murder. Michael claimed that after being kicked out of the house, he had been living in Courtney's closet. One day, when Stephen returned home, Courtney woke Michael up and told him that her father had found out he was staying with them. When he asked Courtney why, she said she would explain later and asked him to walk the dog, which he did. Michael ran to the mall because he was worried that Stephen would find out he was near his home. However, after the police informed him of Stephen's death, his story changed dramatically. He began to cry and said that after Stephen tried to confront Courtney about the missing money on his credit card, she asked Michael to kill Stephen and he agreed. His story shifts from being unaware of the death to saying he was asked to kill Stephen. Courtney's interrogation was also unproductive. She gave two different statements. In her first interrogation, she blamed Michael entirely, claiming she had no knowledge of her father's death until he informed her. In a later confession, however, she revealed much more information to police. Courtney maintained that the murder was Michael's idea and admitted to helping him by removing Stephen's dog from the room before the incident and placing the bat by the bedroom door. She said she heard everything while Michael killed her father. But by the end of the trial in September 2006, her story had changed dramatically. Courtney was convicted of murder. When asked if she had any final statements, she maintained her innocence throughout the trial but stated that she wanted to publicly acknowledge that Michael Morin did not kill her father. She took full responsibility and agreed to her sentence. This shocking admission took everyone in the courtroom by surprise. However, Courtney's stance changed less than a year later. At Michael's trial in April 2007, where he faced the death penalty if convicted, Courtney did not repeat her previous statement that she was solely responsible for the crime and that Michael had nothing to do with it. Ultimately, Michael Morin was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. In 2017, Courtney Schulhoff was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Although both men involved were punished, the exact details of the case remain unclear. It was confirmed that Stephen was killed with a baseball bat. But it is still unclear which of the two did the killing. Courtney did not confess to killing her father, but Michael did. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Timothy McNeil. On July 19, 2007, two police officers responded to the home of 60-year-old Timothy McNeil on Merrick Drive in San Diego, California. Timothy had returned home around noon to have lunch with his stepdaughter, Bray Hansen. During lunch, a masked intruder entered the home and shot Timothy in front of Bray and then quickly fled the scene. Bray called 911. When the police arrived, they found Timothy lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood and was dead. Timothy was wearing a shirt but no pants, which seemed unusual. He may have been changing clothes at the time. Bray was in shock after witnessing the murder of her loved one. She was very distraught, so the police helped calm her down. Bray was the only person who survived the attack and was able to help identify the attacker. Bray was 17 at the time of the incident, and her testimony was invaluable to the police. Once her panic subsided, Bray recounted that a masked armed man entered their home. He ordered her to tie Timothy's hands and then bound her own hands as well. The attacker was aware of a safe containing money and valuables in the house and demanded that Timothy open it. But Timothy refused and was shot. The assailant then fled through the open back door. Police arrived to investigate the scene and quickly discovered a Magnum .357 revolver, which was likely the murder weapon. This weapon was sent for forensic analysis. During the investigation, police found a phone on the pool table and were puzzled as to how Bray could have dialed 911 if she was tied up and the phone was there. The police, accompanied by search dogs, thoroughly searched the areas surrounding the house in hopes of finding more evidence and witnesses. One neighbor mentioned hearing 4 loud pops but didn't think much of them at the time, not realizing they were gunshots. It wasn't until 20 minutes later, when police and special service helicopters arrived and cordoned off the area, that he understood something serious had happened. He then approached the police for more information. Many other neighbors shared similar experiences, with several providing crucial details. They reported seeing a young man run out of Timothy's house in broad daylight, climb over the fence and run down the street. During the search and inspection of the crime scene near the back entrance, police discovered 2 important pieces of evidence: scraps of dark fabric from clothing that the suspect had left behind while fleeing. Along the path leading from the house, they also found a black mask hanging from one of the trees. DNA from the suspect was likely to be present on these clothing items. It was a very hot day, and the police believed the suspect was sweating, so all these materials were sent for further examination. Forensic experts later determined that the scraps of fabric were the remains of a t-shirt the attacker may have been wearing. The gun found at the scene was confirmed to be the murder weapon and was registered to Timothy's second wife, who had died several months earlier. She had kept the gun in her nightstand, leading police to suspect that Timothy's killer was someone close to him. Timothy, a respected lawyer. His family, friends, and neighbors were shocked by his murder. When the police investigated him, they learned that Timothy had lived a clean and upright life, avoiding any connection to trouble or danger. Those who knew him considered him a devoted family man, a good friend, and a man of good humor. He was also a good lawyer, showing remarkable talent in court and not losing a case in many years. A successful lawyer may have encountered a powerful rival who wants to eliminate him, prompting police to investigate the possibility. A survey of Timothy's colleagues revealed that he had several enemies, but no one thought this would lead to such a violent attack on Timothy's home. Police suspect the motive for the crime was related to his family. Timothy had a daughter named Erin McNeil from his first marriage. Erin often mentioned that her father was very kind and skilled at solving problems. During conversations, it became clear that Timothy had been married twice. His second marriage was to Doreen, who had a child from a previous relationship. Timothy met Doreen at his law office when she sought help with her divorce. They connected over their shared experiences as divorced parents with children. Doreen's daughter, Bray, got along well with Timothy's family. She was an excellent student and aspired to become a lawyer like Timothy. Bray was also fluent in French and developed a strong bond with Timothy, who embraced her as his own daughter from the moment he met Doreen. Timothy was remembered by his family as a loving father. When his daughter Erin learned of the incident, she quickly contacted Bray. However, Erin was unable to contact she directly. Bray was being questioned at the police station to provide vital information. One detail from Bray surprised the police. She said that her attacker had used an electronic device to change her voice to sound like a cartoon character. This was unusual for such crimes, as attackers usually try to appear scary rather than funny. Another strange detail emerged during the interrogation when the name Nathaniel was mentioned. Bray accidentally mentioned the robber by this name when talking to the police. However, when the police asked further, she became nervous and denied saying so. This raised the police's suspicions. It seemed likely that Bray was hiding something, prompting them to investigate her further. Unbeknownst to her, the interrogation was being recorded, capturing everything she said. The questioning lasted several hours, after which Bray was taken to her Aunt Bonnie's house, a place she chose because it made her feel safe after the incident. The strange behavior of Bray continued to raise suspicions. Police felt that she was withholding information. When Bray saw a police sketch of the suspect, based on descriptions from neighbors who had seen him running down the street, she pointed out a difference. She mentioned that the suspect's chin looked more square, but it puzzled the police how she could know this since she hadn't seen his face during the crime. Her Aunt Bonnie overheard this comment and began to question Bray's credibility. At the station, Bray reiterated her statement, but struggled to explain how she could identify the attacker's face despite him wearing a mask. After reviewing Bray's statement, the police determined that she had lied. As a result, Bray became a potential suspect in the case. Less than 12 hours after the incident, around 11 p.m., officers arrived at Bonnie's home to arrest Bray Hansen, who was suspected of murdering her stepfather Timothy. When the officers expressed their suspicions, Bray stood up, turned around, and put her hands behind her back. She did not resist or deny her guilt. The police interpreted this as a sign that she was involved. If she were innocent, she would have resisted arrest. Bray then revealed to the police the details of a dark plan targeting Timothy. The girl insisted that she was not at fault. She mentioned that she had unwittingly become involved in a plot orchestrated by her brother Nathaniel. She recounted how Nathaniel broke into their home, restrained her, attacked Timothy, and they fought. She was so frightened at the time, so she turned away. When she heard gunshots, she assumed that Timothy had killed her brother. However, when she looked back, she realized that Timothy had been killed. Bray said she did everything she could to prevent this tragic event. She tried to convince Nathaniel not to kill her stepfather, but was unsuccessful. The news affected Timothy's biological daughter, Erin. She described her heart as truly broken. Erin could not believe that her father had been killed by people he considered close, the children of his second wife, people he raised as family. He had given them a good life, and they had repaid him with betrayal that led to his tragic death. The police then attempt to locate Nathaniel. Bray mentions that her brother lives in Arizona while attending a local college. They continue to interrogate her to find out the truth. During questioning, Bray confesses that she was involved in her stepfather's murder because she played a major role in a plot with her brother. She reveals that she and Nathaniel planned the murder and considered various methods, such as beating Timothy to death with a baseball bat or giving him a lethal injection. Ultimately, they chose not to carry out the act themselves and decided to hire a hitman instead. They hired a hitman and left cash, house keys, and a pistol in a small box in the yard. However, the hitman never showed up, complicating the situation. Nathaniel insisted that they had to act on their own. Bray had previously refused to go with her brother, believing that their plan would never work, while Nathaniel was determined to proceed. He therefore decided to act alone and eventually broke into the house, killing Timothy. The police did not believe Bray's testimony, suspecting that she was hiding something. The police therefore continued to pressure her with leading questions to incriminate Bray. Eventually, she became confused and admitted that she had conspired with her brother. Bray arranged to have lunch with Timothy and informed Nathaniel about it. After Timothy returned home, she and her brother tied Timothy's hands behind his back and forced him to kneel in the laundry room. In this position, Bray killed Timothy with 4 shots. After committing the crime, Nathaniel fled. At this point, it appeared that Bray tried to cry, but no tears came. Bray calmly looked the police in the eyes and coldly recounted the plot and the murder. It was upsetting to see the 17-year-old girl without any emotion and without remorse for her actions. Throughout her testimony, Bray repeatedly blamed her brother for the crime. Bray claimed that she was too scared to tell the truth when she called the police because Nathaniel had threatened her. If Nathaniel were caught, she would also go to jail. However, her explanation raised many questions. They quickly located Nathaniel in the middle of the night. Police then tracked him down and went to his home to arrest him. Police in San Diego, who were leading the murder investigation, were notified of the arrest and flew to Phoenix the next morning to question him. When questioned, Nathaniel initially remained silent and requested a lawyer. However, he quickly changed his mind and decided to speak to the police, waiving his right to legal counsel. During the conversation, he calmly provided vital information, admitting that he had been present at the scene when Timothy was killed. Nathaniel claimed that he had no real motive for the crime. Although he felt anger toward Timothy, especially after being fired from the family business, he insisted that he did not actually want his father to die. When Timothy saw Nathaniel with the gun, his stepfather begged him not to shoot and instead leave the house, promising that Timothy would not call the police. However, Nathaniel did not listen. He killed Timothy. When asked if Bray was involved in the case, Nathaniel insisted that she did not kill Timothy. The police need to determine who actually killed Timothy, which means finding out the motive behind the breakdown of Timothy's relationship with his wife's children. When Timothy met Doreen, she had a 4-year-old daughter, Bray, and a 6-year-old son, Nathaniel. Timothy took on the role of a father to them, but while Bray was bright and cheerful, Nathaniel was very challenging. Timothy made efforts to bond with Nathaniel, but he did not accept Timothy as his mother's new partner and often caused trouble. The problems worsened when Nathaniel and Bray grew up, justifying their behavior by saying that their mother had problems with alcohol, which led her to constantly dump her problems on them. When Nathaniel turned 12, he was forced to move to his grandmother's house in Arizona. There, he worked hard. As he grew older, he developed a knack for computers and became a responsible young man. Nathaniel did well in college and was looking forward to a better future. In 2006, their mother Doreen died from an overdose. This tragedy brought the children and Timothy closer together, especially Nathaniel, who tried his best to stay close to Timothy during this time. Bray had a good relationship with Timothy and often encouraged her brother to maintain a positive relationship with Timothy. Timothy supported and cared for them. Timothy had recently purchased a new computer for Nathaniel, who used it to work at Timothy's company until an altercation resulted in Nathaniel being fired. Even so, they kept in touch, and Timothy helped him financially. Nathaniel noted that during this time, Timothy's relationship with Bray had deteriorated considerably. They used to be very close, but Bray has recently been angry and emotionally outburst towards Timothy because he started dating someone new. Bray had a few close people she could trust, and her stepfather Timothy meant a lot to her. However, he suddenly began to distance himself from her. During an interview, the police recalled that the Bray had mentioned feeling worthless because of Timothy's recent behavior, but they did not understand what it meant at the time. Now the situation has become clearer. The police discovered that shortly before Doreen died, Timothy had begun a romantic relationship with Kim Mara. This made Bray extremely angry with Timothy, as Bray considered him her own and feared that he would completely cut her out of his life. This was a huge blow to Bray, as she truly loved her second father, but felt that she was becoming meaningless to him. The most shocking moment was when he canceled his birthday party to spend time with his new girlfriend. Nathan claimed he was not in San Diego when the crime occurred, but this was false. DNA evidence found on a mask nearby matched him, and his phone's geolocation confirmed he was at the scene. Neighbors who witnessed a young man fleeing also described Nathaniel, indicating he was present during the crime. Police suspect both Nathaniel and Bray of having something to do with Timothy's death. They have been charged with first-degree murder, including serious aggravating circumstances. The prosecutor's office claims that Timothy was lured into a deadly trap, and as a result, they face life in prison without the possibility of parole. 2 years have passed since Timothy's death, and Nathaniel and Bray are in prison awaiting trial. At the time the trial began, Bray was 19 and Nathaniel was 21. They were tried as adults, but separately. Bray's trial took place first, then Nathaniel's. During Bray's trial, she initially refused to testify against her brother. This situation was complicated by the evidence surrounding the murder. Neither the crime scene nor the weapon had any fingerprints or DNA that belonged to Nathaniel. The prosecutor convinced the jury of Nathaniel and Bray's guilt using circumstantial evidence. This included a mask with Nathaniel's DNA on it and a witness description that identified him as the person who fled the scene of the crime. The jury deliberated all day and ultimately returned a surprising verdict. The jury found Bray Hansen guilty and Nathaniel Gann not guilty. This meant that Bray would face a retrial, much to the prosecutor's disappointment. Meanwhile, it was revealed that the police had failed to provide the prosecution with a recording of Nathaniel's crucial interrogation, in which he confessed to the murder. This recording could have significantly changed the outcome of the case. The judge ruled that this confession could not be presented to the jury because his confession was invalid without legal representation, especially since he was a minor at the time. This was a major setback for the prosecution, as it eliminated their strongest evidence, the criminal's confession. The prosecutor's office decided on a new strategy. They would question both Bray and Nathaniel at the same time, with the goal of holding both men accountable. The evidence would be considered by 2 separate juries. The prosecution argued that this would prove that Bray and Nathaniel had cooperated. The defense faced challenges as well. Nathaniel was easier to defend because his confession could not be presented to the jury. In contrast, Bray's confession, which was recorded on camera, was admitted as evidence in court. The defense attorneys argued that Bray initially intended to execute the criminal plan out of revenge against their father, but later changed her mind. Meanwhile, her brother Nathaniel went through with the plan. The prosecutor's office argued that the idea for the murder came from Bray, who wanted her stepfather dead because she felt abandoned. However, Bray's attorney convinced the jury that Nathaniel had coerced her into the plan by threatening her with a gun and preventing her from escaping. The situation was complicated by numerous lies, which made the jury skeptical of the unproven claims. Additionally, Bray's confession was recorded, and the jury had the opportunity to view the video. At this point, a new character emerged, an informant who had been Nathaniel's cellmate while he awaited trial. The informant said that Bray had significant influence over Nathaniel. She initiated and convinced Nathaniel to commit the murder. The informant's testimony matched what Nathaniel said during his interrogation. However, Bray's defense was quick to point out that Nathaniel had a history of convictions for dishonesty, in an attempt to cast doubt on his testimony and sway the jury against him. To portray Nathaniel as ruthless and dangerous, Bray's lawyer brought his ex-girlfriend to testify in court. The ex-girlfriend admitted that he had abandoned her during their school days. However, she claimed that no dramatic incident had occurred. She had only come to court to take revenge on him. The final piece of evidence was a letter written by Bray on the night of her arrest. This letter was not sent to anyone because she intended to end her life after writing it. In the letter, she indicated that killing Timothy would be easy, quick, and clean. Bray confessed her guilt in this letter and expressed that she never intended to back out of the plot. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury, who will review the evidence and reach a verdict. Bray was indifferent to the outcome, saying she had thought about taking her own life since she was 11 years old. The jury returned a swift verdict in Bray's case, taking just 6 hours to decide. In contrast, the jury in Nathaniel's case deliberated for 2 days, as they found his guilt to be a more complicated matter. Ultimately, both were convicted of first-degree murder. Nathaniel Gann was sentenced to life in prison, but eligible for parole after 25 years. Bray Hansen, on the other hand, received a harsher sentence because the jury determined that she was the one who set him up, which was considered an aggravating factor. As a result, she will spend the rest of her life in prison without parole. Timothy's family was pleased with the verdict. Timothy's biological daughter, Erin, expressed sympathy for Nathaniel and Bray. Erin noted that she grew up mostly with her mother and had less contact with her father than Bray and Nathaniel. Erin got married on the first anniversary of Timothy's death. The date had been set before the tragedy, and the couple decided not to postpone the wedding. In 2015, Bray successfully appealed her sentence, which was reduced to 26 years. Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll be exploring a new case, the case of Amanda Mangus. Amanda Mangus was a kind and friendly girl from a young age. She was sociable, had many friends, and treated others with warmth. However, she was not too trusting and remained quite selective in choosing her immediate environment. Amanda grew up in a small town called Delta, Ohio, in the United States, with a population of just 3,000 people. She had a passion for the humanities and a deep love for children, which inspired her to pursue a career as an elementary school teacher. Amanda paid great attention to education because she wanted to ensure financial stability for herself in the future. Her plan was to graduate from college, find a full-time job, and establish her career before starting a family. Unfortunately, reality turned out to be very different from Amanda's idealized dreams. Her parents' relationship was filled with constant conflict and eventually ended in divorce. Amanda was 13 years old at the time, and she chose to live with her father, Mike Mangus. Not long after, her father remarried a woman named Deborah, and the three of them began living together happily as a new family. Among her friends, Amanda had a special connection with a boy named James Ramey, whom she had known since kindergarten. They grew up together, attended the same school, and became inseparable. During their summer jobs, Amanda described James as a funny and nice young man. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romantic feelings, and they eventually began dating. Their relationship deepened after they graduated from school. Determined to be independent, she found a part-time job in the kitchen of a local restaurant while continuing her studies. Introducing James to her family did not go as she had hoped. Her family, including her stepmother Deborah, disapproved of James from the start and expressed concerns about their relationship. However, she was so in love that she dismissed all the warnings as exaggerations, believing she knew better than others what to do. Normally, the adults viewed the situation more rationally. James began acting oddly, but despite this, Amanda, still very young, pursued a serious relationship with him. Eventually, Amanda decided to move out of her family home and live with James in his apartment. After they moved in together, James's behavior took a drastic turn for the worse. Over time, he became increasingly controlling, constantly jealous, and frequently accused Amanda of infidelity. His behavior escalated into emotional abuse, and Amanda began to experience the worst fears her relatives had warned her about. Being inexperienced, Amanda didn't initially understand what was happening in her relationship. She wanted to leave James fairly quickly because of his controlling and manipulative nature, but fear held her back. James acted as though he had the right to control every part of her life, from her friends to the clothes she wore. Even small actions, like Amanda leaving the house to go to the store, would prompt James to call her within minutes. Things took an even darker turn when Amanda discovered she was pregnant. At first, James reacted with indifference, but his discontent grew as Amanda paid less attention to him. Even though James wanted her not to give birth to this baby, Amanda refused it and focused on becoming a mother. Preparing for motherhood demanded much of her attention, which caused further strain on their relationship, as she was no longer completely focused on James. James kept insisting that he didn't want the child and pressured Amanda. However, Amanda steadfastly refused to comply with his request. On May 21, 2016, she gave birth to a baby boy. By this time, her relationship with almost all her friends had deteriorated. James was present at the hospital during the birth, but which only added to the tension. Amanda wanted to reconnect with her relatives, but James intentionally prevented her from doing so. Her father and stepmother strongly disliked James, and every meeting with him led to arguments and heightened conflict. James's behavior was typical of a manipulator. As a result, Amanda's father and stepmother were unable to see their grandson when he was born. They only met him for the first time when he was 3 months old. During this period, Amanda could only communicate with her parents through messages and share photos of the baby, Winston. Over time, James became increasingly controlling and manipulative. Even minor issues would upset him, and he would escalate them into major conflicts. His most frequent tactic was accusing Amanda of infidelity, often suggesting that Winston was not his son. Amanda was deeply hurt by this behavior. She resisted James in every way she could, but her struggles extended beyond dealing with him. She was also battling postpartum depression and the hormonal changes common among young mothers. The situation continued to deteriorate until James escalated from verbal abuse to physical threats. One day, he held a knife to Amanda's throat and threatened to kill her. Despite everything, Amanda still believed she could save the family for her son's sake. She convinced herself that James's aggression was solely due to the challenges their family faced after the birth of their child. Amanda chose not to confide in her relatives about the incident, instead sharing her feelings with a few friends. James's manipulative behavior not only terrified her, but also strained her relationships with her loved ones, leaving her afraid to seek their support. This is what usually happens in such situations. Amanda's friends recognized that what she was enduring was far from normal. With the arrival of Winston, James's behavior became increasingly dangerous, posing a threat not only to Amanda, but also to Winston. So, her friends urged her to leave him. Amanda was seriously considering ending the relationship, but the decision wasn't easy for her. She vividly remembered how loving, caring, and gentle James had been at the start. They had been friends for years, and Amanda held on to the hope that the current issues were only temporary. She believed that, with time, everyone would adjust. Because of this, she repeatedly forgave James for his insults and even the physical violence he had begun using. On one evening following argument, James and Amanda decided to go to a bar to have a drink, cool off, and discuss their problems. Deborah came over to watch the baby, expecting to stay only a couple of hours. But after 3 hours, neither Amanda nor James had returned home. That night, James drank heavily, while Amanda stayed sober. She ended up driving them home but had barely gone 2 blocks when James insisted on taking over the wheel. At first, Amanda resisted, but James grew angry. To avoid escalating the situation, she reluctantly gave in. It ought to be a reckless decision. Neither James nor Amanda was wearing a seatbelt. Just a few hundred meters down the road, James crashed into a parked car. The impact was severe. James, who was driving, hit the steering wheel but escaped with minor injuries. Amanda, however, struck the windshield with great force, shattering it and sustaining deep cuts. Despite being clearly responsible for the accident, James immediately began blaming Amanda, hurling insults and accusing her of causing the crash. Amanda, bleeding and worried about the severity of her injuries, ignored his accusations, focused on stopping the bleeding and assessing her condition. James, however, completely lost control, escalating from verbal abuse to physical violence and attacking his injured girlfriend. After the incident, Amanda realized that James lacked any genuine feelings for her. He was a cruel person she needed to avoid. Acting decisively, she immediately wrote a statement for the police and removed James from all her contacts. Following the attack and the accident, Amanda called her father, Mike, asking him to take her and her child back home. Once reunited with her family, Amanda obtained a restraining order against James, feeling confident that she and her son were now safe. Back at her parents' house, Amanda resumed living with them as she had before. Determined to move on, she focused on leaving behind the toxic relationship and erasing James from her life altogether. She found a job as a waitress at a local restaurant popular in the small town, where many residents already knew her. Amanda began reconnecting with old acquaintances, meeting new people, and building new friendships. As a naturally outgoing person, she quickly became well-liked by the restaurant's patrons. Life slowly began to improve, and the pain of her past gradually started to fade. Amanda earned enough money to support herself and her child, and soon she started searching for an apartment to rent. Despite getting along well with her parents, their home was too small for her to truly begin the next chapter of her life. While working at the restaurant, Amanda met a young man named Curtis. They had gone to school together in the past, but had barely spoken back then. As they started talking, Amanda discovered that Curtis was kind and caring. Their friendship quickly blossomed into a romantic relationship. Curtis embraced Winston, often making it clear that he considered the boy a part of his family. This warmed Amanda's heart and gave her hope for the future. On March 13, 2017, Amanda officially announced their relationship on social media, changing her status to in a relationship to emphasize their commitment. That same day, Curtis moved in with Amanda, and they began living together as a family, along with Amanda's baby, her father, and her stepmother. They also making plans to rent an apartment and build a life together. Early the next morning, on Tuesday, March 14, 2017, Curtis left for work before 5 a.m. At home, only Amanda and Deborah were at home. Amanda was still in bed, and Winston was quietly in his crib. About an hour later, Deborah was startled by a loud bang that jolted her awake. Half asleep, she couldn't immediately determine what had happened. It sounded like either a sound of weapons or something heavy falling. Alarmed, Deborah got out of bed to investigate. She called out for Amanda, but instead of a response, she heard a strange noise. Immediately after that, she heard footsteps rushing toward her room. Believing that an intruder had entered the house, Deborah reacted swiftly. To protect herself, she locked her bedroom door and leaned against it to block entry. However, the intruder attacked at the door lock, causing a bullet to graze Deborah's thumb and narrowly missing a more serious injury. With the lock destroyed, the intruder kicked the door open and entered the room. He was a masked man holding a weapon and appeared agitated, scanning the room cautiously as though anticipating resistance. The man glanced at Deborah and demanded to know about Curtis. Upon seeing Deborah in her pajamas, he appeared momentarily confused. Deborah told him that Curtis had already left for work roughly half an hour earlier. This enraged the intruder further. He admitted to attack Amanda and warned that he wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who tried to stop him. He then demanded Deborah's obedience. The man ordered Deborah to retrieve Amanda's mobile phone and demanded she hand over the baby. When Deborah tried to protest, he silently but menacingly pulled the trigger, showing it clear that she had no choice. Realizing resistance was futile, Deborah removed Winston from the crib but did not hand him over to the stranger, saying that she would accompany the baby. She also gave the man Amanda's mobile phone, as he had demanded. The stranger aimed a weapon at the back of Deborah's head and forced her to leave the house without letting her change her clothes. Despite the cold weather, Deborah was barefoot and still wearing her pajamas. He made her get into a car. Once inside, he removed his mask, and Deborah recognized him. It was James. He told her he needed an escort to escape the city with Winston, planning to use her as a hostage. James demanded that she guide him along the safest route to avoid police patrols. A few hundred meters from the house, James ordered her to call an ambulance. He claimed that Amanda, who was injured and could still be saved, was inside the house. He insisted that Deborah report this to the ambulance. She complied and called 911, informing the dispatcher about the injured girl and giving Amanda's address. However, before she could provide more details, the dispatcher asked for additional information, and James grabbed the phone. The police arrived at the scene within a minute of receiving the call. Patrol officers were the first to respond and immediately noticed that the front door was unlocked. Upon entering the house, one officer heard an alarm and followed the sound to Amanda's room. There, they found Amanda lying in bed and still alive. At first, the officers suspected a self-harm attempt and asked Amanda where the weapon was. Amanda didn't know where the weapon was, and it wasn't anywhere nearby. It soon became clear that someone else had attacked her. Amanda then asked about her child. One officer noticed a crib in the room, but it was empty. When asked who had taken her son, Amanda managed to say James Ramey before losing consciousness. Despite the doctor's efforts to save her, Amanda was already in critical condition. She was rushed to the hospital but later succumbed to her injuries. During this time, Curtis and Mike was at work and completely unaware of the events unfolding at home. Deborah was being held hostage and was unable to alert anyone about the situation. The police had limited information, but discovered that Deborah and 10-month-old Winston were likely being held hostage by the attacker. Right away, an alarm was raised to notify local residents of the danger. An armed criminal with hostages in a car was on the run. Meanwhile, Deborah, holding Winston, was in the car with James as he sped away from the city. James was determined to reach the airport and demanded Deborah's assistance. Throughout the drive, he was visibly anxious. When they approached a railroad crossing, the barriers began to close as a train was approaching. In his panic, James didn't stop but instead accelerated. The crossing was elevated, and the car hit it so hard that something broke. He managed to get across the tracks, but the crash damaged both the car and the barriers. James and the hostages stopped a short distance from the railway, as the car could no longer move. Realizing he was trapped and needed help, James used his mobile phone to call a friend. Soon, a van arrived with a woman and 2 children inside. James, Deborah, and the baby got into the van, and they were driven to a house at an unknown location, apparently the home of the van's driver. Inside the house, James's friend was present. James made Deborah sit on the couch with the baby while he paced nervously around the room, holding a weapon. Clearly agitated, he began formulating a plan to take his friend's van and continue his escape in an effort to leave the country. At one point, Deborah asked to use the bathroom. James agreed but insisted that his friend accompany her. However, the friend stayed outside the bathroom. Seizing the opportunity, Deborah attempted to escape through the bathroom window, but was unsuccessful. By this time, the woman who had taken them in the van and left the house with the children. She understood that the police could come here and was afraid that shooting would start. No one wanted to get hurt, especially with the children. James remained on edge as he hurriedly left with the hostages. He didn't trust anyone and suspected that his friend might contact the police. Nervous and tense, James drove while smoking a cigarette to calm himself and stay focused on the road. However, his lighter suddenly stopped working, prompting him to stop at the nearest gas station to buy a new one. Before leaving the van, James warned Deborah not to try anything foolish or she would be attacked. Inside the gas station store, James was captured on surveillance cameras for the first time since his escape. Security footage showed him looking visibly agitated, though at that moment, no one yet understood how dangerous him truly was. While walking through the store, an emergency alert suddenly sounded. It was a police warning, and a photo of James was displayed. Authorities informed local residents about the kidnapping of Deborah and the child. Additionally, they reported that Amanda had not survived the attack. She died in the hospital, although James had personally harmed Amanda, but he seemed deeply shaken by the news of her death. He returned to the car with a lighter, refusing to leave. He stood there, lost in thought, contemplating his next move. James began speaking aloud. He stated he had only 5 bullets left, 1 intended for Winston, 1 for Deborah, and the other 3 to confront the police. He believed those bullets would be enough to overpower the police and then take their weapons. There was also a backup plan. If things didn't go as intended, James had kept 1 last bullet for himself. He resolved to either escape or take his end life if the escape failed. After making this horrifying statement, they continued driving. Deborah's anxiety deepened, sensing the growing danger. By the time the police arrived at the gas station, it was too late. James and the hostages had already left. The FBI soon took over the case. They were able to estimate James's direction, but remained several hours behind him. To stop James, the operation enlisted police officers from surrounding cities and even neighboring states. At this time, the case had now escalated to the federal level. In the following hours, no progress has been recorded. Deborah and Winston were still being held hostage by James, while the police carefully tracked their movements. A camera at another gas station, a few hundred kilometers from the previous one, captured the van driven by James's friend. James stopped there as well but forced Deborah to remain in the van, threatening to kill her if she attempted to seek help. Desperate, Deborah considered approaching a passerby to explain her situation, but she didn't even know her exact location. She realized they were far from home, where people might not be aware of the kidnapping and murder. Ultimately, she chose not to take the risk and placed her hopes in the police, trusting that they were doing everything possible to rescue her and Winston. James bought a can of beer, some chewing gum, and used the restroom. After he returned, Deborah asked to use the restroom as well. Since she looked suspicious without proper clothing and footwear, he gave her a jacket and sneakers. This was fortunate because it was cold outside. Once Deborah returned, James drove away from the scene with the hostages. The police still pursued and eventually located the car. A gas station worker, upon learning about the situation, contacted the authorities. On the road, James drove recklessly and regardless. At one point, Deborah tried to move closer to Winston in the back seat to shield him with her body if the attack began, but James prevented her. Winston remained in the back lie throughout the incident. James abruptly stopped the car and placed his child on his lap. Armed police officers approached and surrounded the in Fulton County, Indiana. Although James had previously made threats and behaved erratically, but finally he did not harm the hostages, police or himself. Instead, he peacefully handed Winston to the police and was taken into custody. Deborah and Winston's dangerous situation finally ends. Overwhelmed with relief, she couldn't even shed tears and fainted on the spot due to the intense stress. Amanda's funeral was held afterwards. She was cherished by many, and her funeral was attended by over 100 people who came to pay their respects. And she was cremated. The investigation revealed that James's erratic behavior was driven by simple jealousy. After seeing a social media post from Amanda stating that she was in a new relationship, he lost control of his emotions and couldn't calm down. James decided to deal with her after previously warning her, when she had dismissed his warnings. Determined, he armed himself and went to Amanda's home, intending to catch her with another man. However, Curtis was no longer there, so James attacked only Amanda. If her new boyfriend had also been present, he likely would have faced the same fate. In the end, James confessed to all his crimes and was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 27 years. Deborah was astonished that Amanda managed to survive until the police arrived and helped investigators identify the attacker. Deborah still considers herself indebted to Amanda and has taken on the responsibility of raising Amanda's son. Winston is being cared for by Amanda's father and stepmother. Amanda's heartbreaking death still leaves everyone in deep mourning. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Sabina. Benjamin and Jennifer, both from Wisconsin, didn't meet until many years later. Benjamin served in the U.S. Marine Corps, while Jennifer was a recent addition to the police department. A video recorded 2 years ago features her husband, Benjamin, sharing how they met while he was stationed in Iraq. In February 2005, Benjamin and several fellow Marines were struck by a mortar shell during the war. One Marine lost his life, and several others, including Benjamin, were injured by shrapnel. He sustained serious injuries to his leg near the knee, his left arm, chest, and head. Fortunately, he survived the attack. While receiving treatment in Germany, he kept in touch with Jennifer by writing to her every day. Eventually, Benjamin returned to his home base in California. Throughout that time, he continued to email Jennifer frequently, and their relationship gradually developed. After leaving the army, his muscles began to heal, his kneecap recovered, and he started walking and using his arm again. He was even able to begin running. He moved back to Wisconsin and spent more time with Jennifer, and their love grew deeper. One day, he asked her if she would be happy to spend the rest of her life with him, and she said yes. Benjamin was honorably discharged in 2005. After that, he married Jennifer, and they actively participated in church activities. There, Benjamin worked to overcome the psychological issues he experienced during the war. He also helped others in his church who were going through mental and emotional struggles. On December 24, 2012, Officer Jennifer Sabina was working the night shift. During her duty, she maintained contact with her husband, Benjamin, through text messages. The last message she received was around 3 a.m. At 4:24 a.m., the dispatcher on duty tried to reach her but received no response. Concerned for her safety, a colleague, Stahl, used GPS tracking to locate her police car. He discovered it was likely parked at the Wauwatosa Fire Station on Underwood Avenue, a common spot for officers to take breaks, grab food, or write reports. Stahl arrived at the scene in under 5 minutes. He found the police car and discovered Jennifer lying on the cold sidewalk in front of the fire station. She had suffered multiple head injuries from a weapon. The investigation into Jennifer's death has been ongoing since her body was found. In her 30s, she worked as a police officer in Wauwatosa for 2 years. She is described as intelligent, energetic, always willing to help, and wants to become a good police officer. State investigators began looking into the crime scene. They found shell casings from 2 different weapons, matching the type of ammunition typically used by the police department in that area. However, Jennifer's service weapon was missing and was not found at the scene. Surveillance cameras in the area were examined for clues about the suspect. Traffic camera footage was also collected to track vehicles entering and leaving the crime scene. Additionally, the snowy ground conditions helped investigators clearly identify tracks leading to and from the scene. If these tracks belonged to the killer, he would be the man Jennifer encountered as she walked out the back door of the fire department. When Benjamin arrived at the Wauwatosa police station that morning, he was promptly questioned about his activities the previous night, which is standard procedure. Benjamin stated that Jennifer left for her night shift around 5:15 p.m. on December 23rd. He did not leave the house until 10 p.m., and the only reason for leaving was to purchase a new video game. After returning home, he did not go out again until the police sergeant called him in the morning, after which he went directly to the station. Benjamin had not received any information about Jennifer over the phone and did not inquire about her condition. However, once at the station and during his questioning by detectives, he eventually asked about her after a few minutes. The police officer faced a difficult task in delivering him the tragic news. After a moment of silence, when Benjamin calmed down, he shared that his wife was the one who supported him a lot in overcoming his post-war trauma. She was his strong support throughout his psychological struggles, always caring and present by his side. The situation was perplexing. The nature of the case suggests this was a personal attack, as there was no evidence of a criminal incident or altercation. Everything suggested that it was an ambush targeting her specifically. Jennifer had no enemies, and her colleagues knew it. Detectives then asked about Jennifer's mental state the day before she left for work, and requested permission to search their home for any clues related to her murder. Benjamin claimed that he and his wife were very happy, and that the night before she left for work, they had hugged and kissed. Later that day, investigators searched their home with Benjamin's permission. During the examination, they discovered 2 holes with bloodstains on the drywall, showing signs consistent with having been caused by a punch. At that moment, the detectives understood that Benjamin was experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder since returning from abroad. They also observed him trying to control his emotions at the police station. Another important discovery at Benjamin's home was a bullet casing. However, no matching bullets were found. Only several corresponding shell casings were present, which raised suspicions. On the same day, Benjamin Sabina was arrested, and his interrogation continued. The investigator pressed him, claiming that something significant had happened that morning, and only he knew the truth. However, he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that his feelings for Jennifer were genuine and that he was not angry with her. He stated that he would never harm her, because his love for her was so deep. Furthermore, he stated that if he were present, he would save her and do everything possible to prevent the tragedy from happening on Christmas Day. Detectives from the Wauwatosa Police Department began reviewing video footage from traffic cameras. They concentrated on the area around the fire station at the time of the murder, which occurred at approximately 4 a.m. on December 24. Surveillance footage from the fire station, located east of Benjamin's home, showed a black Toyota with tinted windows heading towards the fire station at 1:35 a.m. Later, at 3:45 a.m., the same black Toyota was seen returning west on Burleigh Street. The timing of this second sighting coincided with the time the car left the scene immediately after the incident, and its route matched the route it would have taken to return to his home. When detectives reviewed the video, they checked the parking lot at the police station and confirmed their suspicions. In the parking lot, they discovered a 2012 black Toyota Prius with dark tinted windows. This was the car Benjamin had parked there before he rushed to the station to ask about his wife. A match between the bullet casings found in his home and CCTV footage led to an official search warrant being issued at his home. During the inspection, agents discovered hair that had been washed down the bathtub drain and noted that the shower curtain had been taken down. A trash can was found in the garage, along with dark clothing hidden in the attic. They also discovered a weapon registered to Jennifer and another weapon in the kitchen. As evidence against Benjamin grew, his demeanor shifted from that of a loving husband to that of a ruthless killer. Eventually, he confessed to the crime. He admitted that he had stalked his wife for several days and waited for her outside a fire station for hours. When he spotted her patrol car, he approached and began to attack her. He claimed that she appeared to reach for his weapon, but he was faster. He pulled out the weapon and killed her again when she tried to stand up. When a detective asked if Jennifer recognized her attacker, Benjamin replied that he didn't think she did. He also admitted to punching her in the face multiple times to ensure she was dead. He then shared his disturbing thoughts, revealing that he had contemplated ending his life. He claimed that his loving wife had told him that if he died, she would do the same. Therefore, he rationalized that killing Jennifer was an act of mercy, believing he was sparing her from the pain of having to take her own life after his death. The investigators did not believe Benjamin's story or his complicated reasoning. They found no evidence to support his claim that the murder was motivated by compassion. However, they admitted that he was very jealous. He was upset about the attention Jennifer received from other men, or at least he thought so. Additionally, Benjamin had a known short temper. Just weeks before her death, Jennifer shared with a co-worker an episode from Benjamin's life that involved post-traumatic stress disorder. She explained that he experienced flashbacks, especially at night, which could lead to aggressive behavior. She felt anxious about working the night shift because it meant her husband would be home alone in a potentially dangerous situation. There was a serious incident when Benjamin pointed a weapon at Jennifer's head while he was having a nightmare. She shared with her colleagues that Benjamin seemed haunted by horrific memories from his time serving in Iraq. His time in Iraq had deeply affected him. He killed 68 people and lost over 50 friends, constantly witnessing the deaths of those close to him. As a Marine, he had been trained to kill, which led to his own internal struggles. During Benjamin's trial, he was brought into court in a wheelchair, handcuffed, and wearing a special vest designed to prevent self-injury. He faced charges of first-degree murder for the death of his wife, Jennifer Sabina. The state of Wisconsin alleges that Benjamin killed his wife out of jealousy. He was jealous of her career, while he himself was unable to continue serving in the military or working in law enforcement due to his injuries. He was also described as possessive and prone to angry outbursts. However, his defense attorney, Michael Steeney, pointed out that he had a troubled military past and had suffered a traumatic brain injury, severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrists also noted that Benjamin's condition was one of the worst they had ever seen. Eventually, Benjamin officially changed his plea to not guilty. Although he had previously admitted his guilt, he now cited mental illness and defects, thereby shifting the focus to psychological evaluations of him. The judge appointed a psychiatrist to assess his mental condition. The prosecution needed to show that Benjamin was aware of his actions. He admitted to stalking his wife in the days leading up to her murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. Furthermore, he took steps to cover up his tracks, such as showering extensively to remove evidence. He also hid both weapons in his home and spent several hours denying his guilt to the police, initially reacting with shock and anger. As the trial progressed, the evidence against him grew, and it became clear that he was guilty of the premeditated murder of his wife. Proving Benjamin's innocence due to mental illness or defect is challenging. In his case, 2 psychiatrists testified in court, both agreeing that he had mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder. However, they also concluded that he was still capable of understanding right from wrong, and did not find him not guilty by reason of insanity. Therefore, it was clearly established from a medical perspective that Benjamin Sabina was mentally ill, but still conscious of his actions. After 6 months, Benjamin changed his plea and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea agreement gave him the opportunity to receive a sentence that would make him eligible for parole. He admitted causing Jennifer's death and intending to kill her, which is a violation of Wisconsin law. Jennifer's family supported the plea bargain and expressed their gratitude for it. During the sentencing, Benjamin's mother read a statement to the court, reflecting on how her son had changed after returning from war. She shared that the once joyful and playful Benjamin had become consumed by the emotional scars from his experiences, She mentioned that he suffered from severe PTSD, experienced flashbacks, insomnia, hypervigilance, anxiety, and had even attempted to end his life due to the trauma of the deaths he witnessed while serving. She noted that she wore her son's dog tags as a reminder that the son they had sent to war was not the same person who had come home. Jennifer's mother also testified at Benjamin's sentencing hearing. She recounted that after a sleepless night, she received a call from the funeral home on Christmas Day. She had asked to see her daughter, but they told her that her face was so badly damaged that she shouldn't look at her. She was overwhelmed with panic and tears. Then, on December 26th, Benjamin, whom she considered her second son, admitted to killing Jennifer. She forgave him and left his future in the hands of God and the justice system. In Wisconsin, the minimum sentence for first-degree murder is 20 years, while the maximum sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Mark Williams recommended a sentence of 40 to 60 years. In his final statement, Benjamin expressed remorse, saying he did not mean to do this to Jennifer Sabina and that he was sorry for taking her life. He added that if he could trade his life for hers right now, he would do it without hesitation. The judge considered Benjamin's confession and acceptance of responsibility as positive factors. The key issue for the judge was to determine how long Benjamin would have to wait before he could apply for early release. It's important to note that a petition for parole does not guarantee it will be granted. Ultimately, the parole term was set at 35 years. If Benjamin Sabina is ever approved for parole, he will be 65 years old at that time. The story of Jennifer Sabina is a heartbreaking tragedy that reflects the impact of war and the terrible consequences of being unable to control emotions. She dedicated her entire life to the community and always supported her husband. However, it all ended tragically in an act of violence, leaving her family and friends in deep sorrow.